Chapter 1. Barbarian City. Thousands of mountains were awakening, and the morning clouds were rising. The spacious streets of the city were already crowded early in the morning. The shops on both sides were bustling, and laughter could be heard constantly on the streets. Recently, the holy mountain had come to select disciples, and such a grand event made the whole city extremely lively. Many young people were rubbing their hands, eager to give it a try. Many young men and women were dressed up, looking handsome and confident. They felt the infatuated gazes of the women around them. Although they pretended not to look at them, they seemed to be very happy in their hearts. Hiya! Suddenly, there was a commotion on the street, and the crowd surged. A group of tall black horses galloped over, kicking up dust and shaking the ground. Some imposing figures were sitting on their backs. These tall black horses were majestic, as if they were full of explosive power. Their bodies were covered with wide black scales, which had a metallic texture, making them look vigorous and extraordinary. Wow, it's the black Iron Dragon horse, and the one in front is young Master Song Wuchio of the Song family. Update most. Get on the SNM. Young Master Song Wuchio is so handsome. There are also the white Jade Wolf Riders and young Master Imo Buffon in front. Green Spirit Demon Tiger is also here, and young Master, he is also here. Then, there were also Snow White Wolf Beasts with strong and vigorous bodies, as well as ferocious green tigers that were eyeing them covetously. The crowd was noisy, and the vigorous and fierce mounts made the ground shake. There were 3 groups of ferocious troops, and the one sitting at the front was a teenager who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. Although the 3 teenagers were not old, their temperaments were extraordinary. At this time, the 3 teenagers seemed to be rushing to a certain place. They looked hurried and angry. Behind the 3 teenagers, there were many young masters and young masters following them. They were all quite elegant and well-dressed, and it seemed that they were also of extraordinary status. Young Master Song Wuchio, young Master Mo Buffon, young Master he, if any of them took a fancy to me, I would be so happy. A young girl looked infatuated, and her eyes were blurred. Forget it. With young Master Song Wuchio's status, how could he possibly take a liking to you? I heard that young Master Song Wuchio and the others have already reached Foundation Establishment and are about to go to the Sacred Mountain to cultivate. A young man's eyes were filled with envy. If he could also become a warrior and go to the legendary Sacred Mountain, then all the young ladies in Man City would definitely chase after him and let him choose one. At the end of a bustling street, a thin figure was leaning against the corner of a wall. His legs were wide open as he sat on the steps. He was a teenager who looked to be about 15 or 16 years old. The young man was wearing a coarse robe that covered his skinny body, making him look fat. There were even a few holes in the robe. As for his attire, the young man didn't seem to care at all as he chewed on a piece of dried grass in his mouth in a cynical manner. Watching the mighty group of people swaggering away in front of him and glancing at the infatuated young ladies on both sides of the street, the young man's mouth curled up slightly. His eyes were filled with disdain as he muttered to himself, "Is this what you call handsome? If I had stayed in Man City back then, these little brats would have nothing to do with me." Where do you think young Master he, young Master Mo Buffon, young Master Song Wuchio, and the other influential people in Man City are going this early in the morning? Some people were puzzled. It was rare to see so many influential people in Man City on a normal day, but today they all appeared together in a hurry. It was very puzzling. The Sacred Mountain's quota will only be open in 3 days. This is the direction out of the city. Could it be that young Master, he, and the others are going out of the city? There was a lot of discussion on the street. The appearance of these influential people was the most eye-catching. 3 years have passed. I know where young Master, he, and the others are going. Suddenly, someone said loudly with a face full of excitement, as if he had remembered something. Immediately, he attracted a lot of attention. 3 years, I remember now. Today should be the day that Scourge comes back. Heavens, is that Scourge really coming back? The entire Man City will never have a day of peace again. He's not just a scourge, he's also a perverted sex fiend. AI, that perverted sex fiend is quite good looking, but what a pity. Oomph, that scourge needs to be alive to come back. After 3 years in Man-Demon Forest, I'm afraid he's dead for sure. No wonder young Master Song Wuchio, and young Master Mo Buffon all appeared. They're going to the city gate to stop that scourge. All the young masters in Man City made a blood oath 3 years ago that if that scourge can still come back to Man City after 3 years, they will definitely not let him enter the city alive. Looks like whether that scourge can survive in Man-Demon Forest or not, I'm afraid he's going to die. The crowd was in an uproar. Men, women, old, and young all joined in and rushed to the city gate to watch the show. Looking at the boiling crowd, He felt very helpless. Didn't he just kiss that girl and hug her in passing? How did he become a street rat that everyone wanted to beat? If that girl didn't beat him up on the street, he wouldn't have been so bored as to drug her. Who hasn't been insensible once? Moreover, he had already said that he would take responsibility until the end. What else could he do? That little girl is the real scourge. She's a femme fatale, that's right. He secretly said. Because of this small matter, Mo Buffon, Hisan, and Song Wuchio actually made a blood oath. Since ancient times, femme fatale was indeed a femme fatale. I'm too lazy to lower myself to the same level as a group of brats. He stood up. His loose and tattered robe swayed. He spat the dried grass in his mouth to the side along with his saliva. He whistled and swaggered away. A few young girls passing by looked at Sui. Looking at his shabby appearance, they originally wanted to avoid him. However, when they saw his face, they couldn't help but take a few more glances. He looked to be 15 or 16 years old. Compared to 3 years ago, he was a lot taller. In addition to these 3 years of inhuman tempering, although Su Yi's face wasn't white, his facial features were extremely distinct. His eyes under his slender eyebrows were shining with a bright light. His figure looked thin, but his body was tall and straight. His skin was bronze. His tattered robe couldn't cover up a special temperament. This temperament was very complicated. It was a bit arrogant and a bit evil. This temperament seemed to come from his bones. This guy's actually quite good looking. It's just that he's a bit shabby. Why do I feel that this guy is a bit similar to that scourge? A few young girls and Sui brushed past each other and lowered their heads as they discussed. Where did he go? Why did he suddenly disappear? When the few young girls wanted to turn around to confirm, they saw that the figure had already disappeared without a trace. They couldn't help but feel puzzled and thought that their eyes were playing tricks on them. Su family, one of the top 5 families in Barbarian City. Hisu Mo Song Lu. These are the top 5 families in Barbarian City. They were also the top 5 families in Barbarian City. In this world where the strong were respected and martial arts prospered, the 5 families were also the guardians of Barbarian City for thousands of years. The position of the governor of Barbarian City had always been rotated among the 5 families. However, in the past 100 years, the position of governor had always been in the hands of the Liu family. The Su family was one of the top 5 families in Barbarian City. For generations, they cultivated martial arts and had produced many experts. Even today, when the Su family's old master, Su Yuntian, was mentioned, the entire Barbarian City was in awe. It was said that 20 years ago, a strong enemy invaded Barbarian Demon Forest and wanted to take over Barbarian City. All the families fought back with all their might. When both sides were entangled in a bloody battle, the Su family's old master, Su Yuntian, who was over 60 years old at that time, led a group of Su family's elite soldiers to open a bloody path and behead the enemy leader. When the battle was mentioned, the entire Barbarian City still remembered it vividly. The Su family's name became even more famous and was respected by the entire Barbarian City. However, 15 years ago, from the day Sui was born, everything started to change. 3 years ago, Sui did something that the entire Barbarian City could no longer tolerate. The governor, Liu Yunyang, was even more furious. In the end, the Su family's old master, Su Yuntian, thickened his skin and personally came out to protect his grandson. Only then did the huge storm calm down. The Sioux family had a large population. The continuous building was like a palace that stretched out in all directions. It was grand and magnificent. However, early in the morning, in front of the Sioux family's majestic gate, there were many hiding figures. These figures were all staring at the Sioux family's gate as if they were looking for something. They didn't even dare to blink, afraid that they would miss something. Higher, at the Sioux family's gate, a group of fierce and imposing troops moved neatly and nimbly. They rode on dark red, well-built mounts that looked like tigers and lions. The Sioux family's guards on the mounts all had sharp gazes that revealed a sense of pride and arrogance. With the Sioux family's status in Barbarian City, as the Sioux family's guards, they naturally had a sense of pride that surpassed ordinary people. Hurry up, otherwise there will be trouble. The leader of this group of guards was a big man who looked to be in his 40s. His body was well-built and had a fierce aura. With one look, one could tell that he definitely lived a life of bloodshed outside. Otherwise, he wouldn't have such an aura. This big man was indeed not a simple person. His name was Sioux Baihan. Although he wasn't a descendant of the Sioux family's bloodline, his status in the Sioux family wasn't low. In the entire Barbarian City, he was a famous person. 20 years ago, Sioux Baihan was one of the Sioux family's elite troops that followed Old Master Sioux out of Barbarian City. Master Han, why did the Sioux family want us to go pick up that person? If there really is trouble with our status, I'm afraid that we won't be able to suppress Mo Buffon, Song Wuchio, and the other young masters. A big man behind Sioux Baihan asked with a puzzled expression. Isn't it clear? None of the other masters in the Sioux family want to go pick up that young master. How could they have the face to do so? But if they don't send people to pick him up, then looking at the situation today, even if that young master was able to survive in that man-eating place for 3 years, he will definitely die at the city gates today. So the Sioux family can only send us. A big man who looked to be in his 30s had a clever look in his eyes. He said, actually, this trip of ours is just for show and to see our luck. That man-eating place, with that young master's half-baked skills, let alone 3 years, he might not even be able to survive in 3 days. Don't say, that young master of ours really is a genius. He can make enemies all over the city, and everyone wants to beat him up. Before even returning to the city, he has already caused a storm. In the past 1,000 years of Barbarian City, I'm afraid there hasn't been a second person like him. I don't know if there won't be anyone like him in the future, but at least there has never been anyone like him before. Another big man laughed. How should I say this? That young master has caused countless troubles since he was young. If he wasn't in the Sioux family and was the young master of the Sioux family, I'm afraid he would have already been killed. A skinny young guard said. Chapter 2. AI. Our entire Sioux clan used to be respected by everyone, but now, when you mention our Sioux clan, people will only remember that our Sioux clan produced a perverted scourge. Some of the men sighed. These years, because of that scourge, their status in Barbarian City had become lower and lower. You guys, pay attention. No matter what, this is still our Sioux clan's young master, the old man's most beloved grandson. This young master has caused trouble, so naturally the Sioux clan's master will punish him. Outside, don't lose our Sioux clan's prestige. If you dare to talk nonsense again, don't blame me for being impolite. K-Carrot. Sioux Baihan turned around and glared at the man behind him. His expression was quite strict. Yes, Master Han, we understand. Suddenly, the expressions of the big men changed, and their auras became fierce. Outside the Sioux clan's main gate, Sioux Yi was standing far away. Looking at the many hidden figures in front of the Sioux clan's main gate, his gaze indifferently swept over them. Then looking at the familiar Sioux clan's main gate, Sioux Yi's mouth curved into a smile. The 3 years of inhumane days were finally over. He couldn't help but stretch and say, Granny Bear, this young master is back. After I freshen up, I'll be a handsome young man again. Little girl, didn't you just kiss and hug me? This is the first kiss and hug of this young master in 2 lifetimes. You didn't lose out, you even took advantage of me. Why did you have to make such a big deal out of it? In a few years, when I marry you, you'll see what happens. He felt indignant when he thought about the inhumane life he had lived for the past 3 years. He spat on the ground again, swallowing his saliva. He secretly thought that if he had known, he would have stuck his tongue in. That would have been a true first kiss. What a pity. Don't even think about marrying her. To be able to come back alive, your Sioux clan is already burning incense. Suddenly, a clear and somewhat immature voice came from behind Su-yi. Su-yi's expression changed. Just now, he was absent-minded and actually allowed someone to get close to him. This was a great taboo. In that instant, Su-yi's body leaned forward. His feet did not seem to move, but at the same time, he turned 360 degrees and an invisible aura spread out. He was like an awakened cheetah, swift and fierce. In his hand that was covered by the wide robe, the tip of a dagger quietly revealed. However, when he saw a chubby face that seemed to have never lost any of its baby fat, Su-yi's vigilant face immediately turned into a smile. At the same time, the dagger quietly disappeared and its aura disappeared. In that instant, the chubby youth did not seem to feel much of the change. He looked at Su-yi, and his small eyes, which were almost closed, completely narrowed into a slit. However, one could see the smile on his face. The youth heavily punched Su-yi's shoulder. He was very happy and excited, and said, "I knew you wouldn't die. Mo Buffon and those guys were not your match at the beginning, and they still are not your match now. How could they possibly stop you from entering the city? Ouch! Are you wearing a steel plate? Why is it so painful?" Before he could finish his sentence, Fatty's fist, which had just landed on Su-yi's shoulder, was pulled back as if he had been electrocuted. His fist was numb, and it hurt as if he had punched a piece of steel. "Hee, Fatty Wong, how did you know I was back?" He was very happy. He put one hand on the fatty's shoulder, and the wide, tattered robe rose up like a skirt. He was very enthusiastic. The fatty's name was Wang Shanwu. He was Su-yi's playmate since childhood and also his best friend. The Wang family in Barbarian City, although not as powerful as the 5 great families, but it was still a first-class power in Barbarian City. From the day Wang Shanwu was born, Wang Shanwu's father hoped that Wang Shanwu would become a powerful martial artist in the future. Therefore, he was named Wang Shanwu. Unfortunately, Wang Shanwu did not live up to his name. Since childhood, his talent was ordinary. However, he and Su-yi were birds of a feather. This made the Wang family worry a lot. "I knew you wouldn't die. You would definitely come back alive." Fatty Wang was very happy. He immediately looked carefully at Su-yi. Looking at Su-yi's current appearance, he seemed a bit surprised. "It looks like you didn't have a good time in Barbarian Demon Forest. I finally made it through." Su-yi gave an embarrassed smile. He didn't say anything. He looked carefully at Fatty Wang, and a light flashed in his eyes. He was a bit surprised. "It looks like you made a lot of progress in these 3 years. These 3 years, I haven't been any better than you. I haven't left the house for 3 whole years. My father has personally watched me cultivate. Unfortunately, I haven't reached the foundation establishment stage." Fatty Wang was very depressed. These 3 years, he hadn't been any better. "That's not like you." Su-yi knew Fatty Wang very well. For 3 whole years, how could this guy not leave the house? "Mo Buffon, He-san and the others wanted me to swear that I would cut off all ties with you. What a joke. How could I possibly listen to those idiots?" Fatty Wang continued, his expression calm. "It's good that you came back alive. Mo Buffon, Song Wuchio, and the others went to the city gate to block you. But even if I used my toes to think, I knew that those idiots wouldn't be able to block you." Wang Shangwu was full of confidence. He knew Su-yi all too well. With just Mo Buffon and the others, there was no way they could block this guy. "Why did Mo Buffon and the others block me?" Su-yi's expression darkened. Mo Buffon, He-san, and the others probably didn't take Fatty Wang seriously. These years, they must have trampled on Fatty Wang quite a bit. That was why Fatty Wang hadn't left the house for 3 whole years. It was also strange that Mo Buffon and the others had the guts to block him. "Isn't it all because of you? It's all because of Lu Ruashi." Fatty Wang rolled his eyes at Sui. In the entire Barbarian City, only this guy in front of him dared to do such a thing to Lu Ruashi. What does this have to do with Lu Ruashi? Su raised his eyebrows. He was a little suspicious. After you were banished, Lu Ruashi announced the next day that if you were able to return alive in 3 years, she would marry whoever killed you. That's why right now, Imo, Buffon, and the others all want to kill you. Fatty Wong glanced at Su and said indifferently. To be honest, he really admired this guy for what he did 3 years ago. In the entire barbarian city, other than this guy in front of him, there probably wasn't a second person who had the guts to do such a thing. Damn, that little girl is so ruthless. Su was stunned. Then, he raised his eyebrows and said, "Wait until I marry her. See how I'll deal with her." Stop daydreaming. First of all, the condition that your family's old man agreed to was that you had to reach the foundation establishment stage after 3 years. Only then would the marriage contract be valid. If you don't reach the foundation establishment stage after 3 years, not only would you be expelled from the Sioux clan, you would also be completely expelled from Barbarian City. Wang Shangwu looked at Su and said, "I really admire you. You actually still have the courage to come back." Su secretly swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He didn't think that Lu Ruashi would be so ruthless. All of this was caused by that girl. Fatty Wong looked at Su and continued. In addition, I'm afraid that even if you reach the foundation establishment stage, you won't be able to marry Lu Ruashi. Why? Sui asked. If it wasn't for that girl, he wouldn't have suffered so much. If he didn't marry her and slowly teach that girl a lesson, he would be letting himself down as a reincarnated human. Wang Shangwu stared at Su and took a deep breath. His eyes trembled as he said seriously, "Not long after you were expelled from Barbarian City, Lu Ruashi went to Sacred Mountain. It said that she tested for royal-level heavenly talent." Royal-level heavenly talent. Hearing this, Su was also fiercely stunned. His body trembled. In this world, the strong were respected and martial arts flourished. However, not everyone had the qualifications to cultivate martial arts. People who cultivated martial arts had different levels of heavenly talent. The higher one's heavenly talent was, the further they could go on the road of cultivation. Lu Ruashi has already become the Sacred Master's personal disciple at Sacred Mountain. It seems that it's because of her that Sacred Mountain chose disciples in Barbarian City this time. Fatty Wong continued speaking. There was also a deep yearning in his eyes. Sacred Mountain was a heaven for all cultivators. It was a heaven for all cultivators. Fatty Wong was very clear about his own heavenly talent. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to enter Sacred Mountain. He could only envy and yearn. Isn't it just royal-level heavenly talent? The corner of Su Yi's mouth curled up. He seemed very relaxed. Suddenly, Su Yi's eyebrows twitched. His slightly raised eyebrows suddenly frowned slightly, as if he felt something. His expression suddenly sank. At the same time, the tip of his foot instinctively kicked to the side. His body immediately jumped away without hesitation. Behind Su, a palm directly shot out. In front of the palm, there was a sharp sound of breaking wind. Essence Soul Realm. Su Yi's expression changed. Only those who had succeeded in the Foundation establishment and stepped into the Essence Soul Realm would have this kind of aura. As Su Yi's figure jumped away, the owner of the palm behind him slid forward. Using a movement technique, the palm moved quickly, like a shadow following the body. 5 fingers clenched tightly, the palm turned into a fist. In front of the fist, there was a layer of light diffusing out. It was as if there was an aura that could explode a mountain sweeping out. Mountain exploding fist. A punch blasted out. Along with a soft shout, the fist carried a powerful aura as it blasted the air and followed closely behind. At the Essence Soul Realm, one had already set foot in the ranks of true martial artists. Even if one was picking flowers and flying leaves, or using flowers and plants as swords, they could still pierce through boulders. What's more, this person was now using a martial skill. Su, be careful. Fatty Wong's expression changed. The person who launched the sneak attack was much stronger than the others. He didn't even have a chance to intervene. He could only shout to remind Su. The fist behind him instantly arrived. The aura was fierce and surging. It made a low sound, causing the air to tremble slightly. Chapter 3. Behind Su-yi, a 17 or 18-year-old youth appeared. He had an angular face and a head full of thick black hair. Under his long eyebrows was a pair of narrow eyes. His eyes inadvertently revealed a light that made people not dare to underestimate him. Behind him, there was a fluctuation of aura. It was obvious that he was the one who launched the sneak attack. Su-wei, what are you doing? Fatty Wong originally intended to grit his teeth and fight, but when he saw the youth in front of him, his face suddenly changed. Su-yi stood up and looked at the youth in front of him. His gaze slightly sank, and a cold light quietly converged under his wide robe. Su-yi naturally knew this youth. He couldn't be more familiar with him. His father was the adopted son of the old man, Su-yun-tian, and he changed his surname to Su. Therefore, Su-wei could be considered as Su-yi's cousin. Since young, he seemed to have extraordinary talent. Judging from the momentum of his attack just now, Su-wei had already stepped into the Foundation Establishment realm and successfully reached the Soul Essence realm. This kind of talent was definitely rare in the entire barbarian city. Looking at Su-yi, Su-wei's mouth slightly twitched. The hand that had just punched out slightly clenched. This kid was actually able to dodge his attack. In Su-wei's imagination, if this kid had just died in his hands, it could be said that it was an accident in the exchange of pointers. At that time, even if he had to be severely punished, it would be worth it. After all, Su-wei was now the #1 person in the Su clan's younger generation. He was the future and hope of the Su clan. However, the scourge in front of him had not died. He had really persevered in that place for 3 years. This was the result that Su-wei did not want to see the most. As the eldest grandson of the Su clan, Su-wei had always felt that he should be the successor of the Su clan. However, because his father was only an adopted son, in the eyes of most of the Su clan's elders, even if his mother was also a member of the Su clan, his talent far surpassed this scourge since young. However, his status was still not as high as this scourge in front of him, especially in the heart of the old man. This scourge had caused such a big disaster, yet the old man still wanted to protect him at all costs. It was enough to show how important this kid was. Originally, he thought that this scourge would definitely die in that place for 3 years. Who would have thought that this scourge's luck was good and he really came back alive? These 3 years were the best 3 years of Su-wei's life. He was already the #1 person among the younger generation of the Su clan, but it also made him more and more worried. This was because Su-wei was very clear that once the scourge in front of him returned, his position in the Su clan and everything he currently possessed would gradually disappear like an illusion. No matter how hard he tried to fight for the Su family in the future, there was a possibility that he would eventually fall into the hands of this scourge. How could all of this not make him burn with jealousy? He actually couldn't compare to a trash from the Su family who only knew how to cause trouble. Cold fury surged within his long and narrow eyes. However, Su-wei slowly exhaled as a smile hung on his handsome face. Looking at Su-yi, Su-wei didn't leave any traces behind. With a smile in his eyes, he said, "After not seeing for 3 years, Su-yi cousin has finally returned. After surviving a great disaster, I'm afraid there will be good fortune in the future. Just now, I was itching to test my skills and wanted to compare notes with you. It seems that Su-yi cousin's skills have also improved quite a bit. Cousin, please don't blame me for being rude." Su-wei, you called that comparing notes. You clearly wanted to kill Su-yi. Fatty Wong said in a low voice, extremely angry. At this moment, Su-yi also tidied up his large, ragged robe. He slightly raised his eyes and indifferently replied to Su-wei, "It's fine. Haha, that's good. It seems that Su Baihan and the others went to the city gate for nothing. I heard that Mo Buffon and the others are currently surrounding Su-yi cousin at the city gate. With Su-yi cousin's strength, he naturally wouldn't fight them head-on. He had already snuck into the city. Although he lost face, it's still better than throwing away his life." Moreover, Su-wei looked at Su-yi with a look of understanding. The ridicule on his face was not concealed in the slightest. His voice paused for a moment. Su Wei looked at Su Yi with a smile that wasn't a smile and continued. Moreover, Su Yi's cousin not only lost face, the entire Su family's dignity has also been thrown away by you. Su Yi slightly sucked in a breath. He didn't come with good intentions. If he couldn't even deal with this thing, then his previous life would have been wasted. In this life, he might as well be reincarnated earlier. Su Yi looked at Su Wei helplessly and said, "You wanted to kill me just now, but you failed. You want to be the successor of the Su family. That's understandable, but you can use your own abilities to fight for it. I have to say, your current actions make me unhappy and seem very childish. You can't go on stage like this, and I'm afraid you won't be recognized by the Su family in the end." Hearing Su Yi's words, this direct and merciless ridicule was tantamount to making everything clear. The smile that was squeezed out on Su Wei's face also slowly disappeared, and the expression on his face became green and red. Su Wei originally thought that after 3 years in the barbarian demon forest, even if this scourge was lucky enough not to die, he would certainly be tortured to the point where he was at death's door. It was already the Su family's ancestors' good fortune that he could return in a sorry state with his tail between his legs. But Su Wei didn't think that this scourge would still be as arrogant as 3 years ago. He still didn't put him in his eyes. At this moment, Su Wei's face sank. His eyes flashed with a cold light. He said, "Su Yi, other than relying on the old man, what else do you have? In terms of talent, you are equal to trash. In the entire barbarian city, who doesn't know that you, Su Yi, are just a useless scourge relying on the Su family's protection? What qualifications do you have to be compared to me?" "Su Wei, don't go too far," Fatty Wong shouted. He looked at Su Wei, but there was obvious fear in his eyes. He knew Fatty Wong too well. Su Wei was the current leader of the Su family's younger generation. A long time ago, it was rumored that he had successfully built his foundation and reached the soul essence realm. Fatty Wong was not his opponent. In the face of Fatty Wong's words, Su Wei turned a deaf ear. He didn't pay any attention to him. His eyes were fixed on Su Yi. "It seems that you have been holding back for a long time. 3 years ago, you were respectful and reverent in front of me. In these 3 years, I haven't been here, but your courage has grown a lot," Su Yi said slightly. His expression was very indifferent, as if he didn't care about Su Wei's words at all. Unspecified currencies yellow. It has to be said that Su Yi's words were like a needle piercing Su Wei's heart. 3 years ago, he had not built his foundation and stepped into the soul essence realm. Although this scourge was just a waste, but after all, he had the old man's protection. He was the legitimate successor of the Su family. He didn't dare to offend him. But now it was different. This scourge was now hated by the entire barbarian city. He had also successfully built his foundation and reached the soul essence realm. He had become a number 1 person in his generation. There were many Su family elders who valued him. The killing intent in his eyes gradually surged. The aura on his body fluctuated. His fists slowly clenched. Su Wei's killing intent was aroused. "It's young Master Su Yi. It's really young Master Su Yi who has returned. And young Master Su Wei." This movement attracted the attention of the guards in front of the Su family's gate. Immediately, someone rushed over. Su Wei glanced over and immediately clenched his teeth. The killing intent in his long and narrow eyes had already become cold and gloomy. Slightly raising his eyes, his face was cold. Su Wei looked at Su Yi and said, "Su Yi, in 3 years, everything has changed. Although you are still alive, you're just like a useless dog. But I'm not the same as before. The trouble you caused is still there. If you're lucky, you can rely on the protection of the Su family and live like a dog for the rest of your life. If you are unlucky, in 2 days, the Su family's young disciples will compete for a few spots to participate in the selection of the sacred mountain. If you are there, I don't mind crippling you on the spot. At that time, no one will be able to protect you. Of course, with your trash strength, not only do you not have the qualifications to participate in the selection, you don't even have the guts to participate in it." As his voice fell, Su Wei flicked his sleeves and turned to leave. Today, there was no chance to get rid of this trash. It wouldn't be too late to find another opportunity in the future. Young Master Su Wei. The Su family's guards rushed over and saluted. Su Wei's face was gloomy, and he ignored them. Looking at Su Wei's back, the corners of Su Yi's mouth curved into a faint smile. He said in an unconcerned voice, "To tell you the truth, based on the fact that you've just entered the soul essence realm, I'm afraid it's not enough to cripple me. In 2 days, as you wish, I'll give you a chance." Hearing the indifferent words behind him, Su Wei's footsteps could not help but slightly stagnate. His face secretly twitched. Originally, he thought that his last warning words were enough to make this trash tuck his tail between his legs. Who would have thought that this trash would actually not put him in his eyes as usual? In 2 days, no one will be able to save you. Su Wei clenched his fists, his eyes emitting a cold light. He then stepped into the Su family and left. "Young Master Su Yi, it really is you." Several of the Su family's gate guards arrived in front of Su Yi. They seemed polite and respectful, but they did not salute. Their attitude towards Su Wei was quite different. Their gazes sized up Su Yi, who seemed to be in dire straits. These guards had some inwardly disdain. This scourge really was nothing after leaving the Su family. Although he still had a life to return, he was so unbearable. Compared to the beggars on the streets, he was not much better. Su Yi saw the gazes of these guards. He faintly smiled, but did not pay attention to them. "Su, you don't really plan a fight with Su Wei in 2 days, do you? Could it be that you've already entered the spirit essence realm?" Fatty Wong arrived in front of Su Yi. His face slightly congealed, also carrying astonishment. Fatty Wong knew that Su Yi's talent was not even as good as his. In these 3 years, he did not know how many medicinal pills and supplements he had consumed. In these 3 years, under the personal supervision of his father, he had suffered many hardships. But he still had not reached the stage of foundation establishment. Could it be that this brat not only survived in the barbaric demon forest, but also successfully entered the spirit essence realm? Su, he shook his head. He was a bit embarrassed and said, "No." Chapter 4. Be careful of Su Wei. He clearly wants to kill you. Not only for the Su family, but also for Lu Ruashi. That brat is very sinister. Fatty Wong looked at Su Yi with deep sympathy in his eyes. To be honest, he really admired this fellow for what he had done 3 years ago. In the entire barbarian city, other than this fellow in front of him, there was no one else who had the guts to do that. It's okay, he's not enough. Su Yi smiled faintly and didn't care too much. Afterward, Fatty Wong told Su Yi that 3 days later, the expert from the Sacred Mountain would select suitable young people to enter the Sacred Mountain. Fatty Wong didn't say anything. He didn't have the qualifications, and Su Yi wasn't even as good as him. How could he have the qualifications? Moreover, even if this guy had the qualifications, Lu Ruashi was currently a fairy on the Sacred Mountain. Even if you lent him 10 guts, he still wouldn't dare to go to the Sacred Mountain. Otherwise, Lu Ruashi would tear this guy apart. Su Yi returned to the Su family. The news swept through the entire Su family like a storm. The entire Su family was in an uproar. My clothes didn't cover my body, and I was as thin as a match. What a miserable sight. Starved until I was only skin and bones, and came back in tatters. That was the barbarian demon forest. Being able to survive is already a miracle. You really are lucky to be able to come back after 3 years in the barbarian demon forest. All kinds of discussions spread throughout the entire Su family, but no one went to visit Su Yi. It seemed that no one wanted to get too close to that scourge. At this moment, Su Yi was leaning on a rocking chair in the courtyard. The originally luxurious courtyard was now only left with silence. It was no longer as grand as it was 3 years ago. "Young Master Su Yi, you're finally back. That's great. I've been counting the days. I've changed the bed sheets and cleaned your room every day, just waiting for you to come back." A young girl who was a bit younger than Su Yi was very excited at this moment and couldn't stop talking. The young girl had an oval face and a pair of slender eyebrows. Although she was wearing coarse clothing, it couldn't hide her youthful and beautiful figure. Her skin was like freshly peeled chestnuts, and her face was radiant. Su Yi put his hands behind his head and leaned against the rocking chair, smiling as he looked at the girl. After not seeing her for 3 years, the little girl from back then had already grown up. Her exquisite and curvaceous body had already begun to become attractive. She was definitely a beauty. So he secretly said in his heart, if this continued for a few more years, he was afraid that she would be incredible. The girl's name was Wan-er. Her parents had both passed away. 10 years ago, he had accidentally met her on the streets of Man City. Seeing that she was all alone, he had brought her back to the Su family, named her Wan-er, and kept her by his side. In Suyi's heart, he had always treated this little girl as his own sister. But this little girl's personality was stubborn, and she had always treated him as a servant. Young master, what are you looking at? Quickly go take a bath. Look at you. When have you ever suffered like this? How could the old man be so heartless as to let you go to the barbarian demon forest? I heard that place is like hell. Seeing Su-yi in such a sorry state, as if he had just crawled back from a beggar's nest, Wan-er's heart ached. Secretly, tears welled up in her eyes, as if they were about to flow out. She had cried and wanted to go with him, but she couldn't. For the past 3 years, she had been counting down the days. I'm fine. Aren't I alive and kicking back? He had not been afraid of many things since he was young, and Wan-er's tears were one of them. He could only obediently get up and take a bath. In the room, Wan-er had already prepared everything for a bath. She had even placed some flower petals and spices in the wooden tub. The fragrance filled the room. Young master, let me help you undress. Wan very naturally helped Su-yi undress. She pulled down the loose robe, and suddenly, she couldn't hold back the tears in her eyes. Young master, you've suffered all these years. Wan-er cried. Her eyes were wet with tears. She saw that Su-yi's back was covered with scars of different sizes and colors. Some of the scars had already healed, but from the looks of it, they were deep enough to see bone. Wan-er couldn't hold it in any longer. Her face was covered with tears, and her heart ached. How could she not guess? What the young master had experienced in the past 3 years was far beyond her imagination. Silly girl, what is there to cry about? He turned his head and smiled. Wiping the tears from the corners of her eyes, he said, you can leave now. I'll take a bath myself. Young master, I used to take care of you while you bathed. Do you not want me anymore? Wan-er's face filled with nervousness. In the past, she used to take care of the young master while he bathed. Most of the time, her eyes were closed, and the young master would only ask her to pass him a towel. Silly girl, you've grown up. Men and women are different. If you take care of me while I bathe, and word gets out, how will you find a good husband to marry? He laughed. Thinking about how he had let this girl take care of him while he bathed 3 years ago, he couldn't help but curse himself for being a beast. I don't plan on getting married. I don't plan on taking care of you for the rest of my life. Wan-er looked at Su-yi, who had turned around. He was much taller than he had been 3 years ago. His body was thin, and now that he had taken off his robe, she could see that he was covered in a bronze color. His muscles bulged like fists, hard and solid, as if they contained explosive power. Young master, it's better if you wash it yourself. Girls are more mature than boys of the same age. Wan-er blushed and ran out of the room, closing the door behind her. He shook his head and laughed. He looked down at his body, which was covered with scars. These were the results of the past 3 years. The Su clan was very large. The inner courtyard, the outer courtyard, the east, south, west, and so on, occupied a vast area. The Su clan had many direct descendants, as well as some collateral descendants. When you added in the guards, servants, and maids, the number of people who lived in the Su clan was over 1,000. Outside the quiet courtyard stood a few figures. They seemed a bit hesitant, as if they were looking for something. Housekeeper Wu, are we really going to go in? I heard that the disaster. He has already returned. We've made things difficult for Wan-er these past few years. I don't know if one has told on us, or if we'll be in trouble. A young servant who looked to be in his 20s spoke. Like the other servants beside him, he kept looking around the courtyard with a worried expression. In these past 3 years, they had bullied Wan-er quite a bit. In front of his servants was a middle-aged man in his 30s. He wasn't very tall, but his clothes were very bright, and his body was tall and sturdy. The middle-aged man looked back at the servant who had spoken. He gave a cold snort and said, "It's good that he's back. I heard that guy came back in such a miserable state that I couldn't bear to look at. I'm afraid he's learned his lesson in the past 3 years in the savage demon forest. Let's take this opportunity to knock some sense into him. Our lives will be a bit easier in the future." With that, the steward bolstered his courage and walked into the courtyard with his head held high. When the servants behind him saw this, they followed him into the courtyard. They trusted the steward. At the very least, the steward had already reached the foundation establishment stage. He would most likely be able to enter the soul awakening stage soon. In any case, he wouldn't be at a disadvantage. Wang was tidying up the courtyard. She thought back to the scene she had just seen. It was the first time she had seen a man's body so closely. It was completely different from when she saw the Sioux clan's bare-chested bodyguard from afar. The more she thought about it, the redder her cheeks became. "Steward Wu, what are you doing here?" Suddenly, she saw the steward and the others arrive. Wang subconsciously took a few steps back. Seeing Wan Er's red cheeks and alluring appearance, the steward couldn't help but stare blankly. He had been eyeing this little girl for a long time, but she was the personal servant of that good-for-nothing young master. Her status was a bit special. In these past 3 years, he had made all sorts of difficulties, threats, and promises, but none of them had worked. He had originally thought that it would be time to use force. Who would have thought that at this critical juncture, the scourge would return? Thinking about how he had made things difficult for this little girl over the past few years, the steward was also a bit worried. He had come today because someone had asked him to take a look. Secondly, he himself was worried and wanted to find out the truth. He wanted to see what the scourge looked like when he returned after being away for 3 years. "Wan Er, I said I would give you half a month. It's about time now. When you first entered the Sioux clan, you didn't register. I have the right to kick you out of the Sioux clan." Steward Wu looked at Wan Er with a burning gaze. This little girl was becoming more and more beautiful. She was like a green apple. Although she was a bit immature, she had a unique flavor. If he didn't take action soon, who knew who would benefit in the future? "Steward Wu, don't go too far. I've been young Master Su Yi's servant since I was young. Who in the Sioux clan doesn't know that? You have no right to kick me out. Besides, young Master Su Yi is back now. If you don't leave now, young Master Su Yi won't let you off later." Warner glared at the steward. Her eyes were like autumn pools hidden under her fine curly eyelashes. Her exquisite red lips, which were like cinnabar, were pressed together. Her pearly white teeth bit down on her tender lips. There was an invisible arrogance in her stubbornness. "Haha, you talking about that scourge? Do you think that good-for-nothing young master can protect you? To tell you the truth, he's not the same as before in the Sioux clan. If you're smart, you know what to choose. Follow me, and you'll have a good life in the future. Otherwise," the steward sneered. A good-for-nothing young master who was already past his prime had returned to the Sioux clan like a prodigal dog. July 8th, that scourge had caused such a huge disaster. Although he had returned, who didn't know what his final outcome would be? Although he was only a steward of the Sioux clan, he didn't need to worry about such a good-for-nothing young master. Chapter 5. An indifferent voice rang out just as Steward Wu finished speaking. Then, a young man with a cold aura appeared in front of Warner. The young man's cold face could not hide his determined edges and corners. Under his sharp eyebrows, his pitch-black eyes seemed to be surrounded by mist, but they revealed an inexplicable sharpness. Between his brows, there was a maturity that was not proportional to his age, but he did not appear old. There was a sharpness in his steadiness, but also a complicated temperament. This temperament was a little arrogant, a little evil. This temperament seemed to come from his bones, as if there was a kind of arrogance in his bones. At first sight, it did not give people any pressure, but after looking at it for a long time, it made people tremble for no reason. The person who came was Su Yi. He had just finished washing up when he heard the commotion outside. With his sharp senses, he more or less knew what had happened. Young Master Su Yi. When the servants saw the young man who had appeared out of nowhere, their bodies trembled subconsciously. No matter what, No one dared to provoke this young master in the past. Everyone was afraid of him. At this moment, the servants were staring at the young man in front of them. Was this really the trash young master that everyone was talking about? His robe was blue, with black embroidered sleeves. His robe was spotless, and his ink-black hair fluttered slightly. His back was abnormally straight, like a sharp blade, containing an enormous amount of tenacity. The servants felt that this young man did not seem like the wretched young master in the rumors. Looking at the current Sue-yi, Warner was also a little stunned. The young master seemed to have something more than 3 years ago. But no matter what, this was the young master Sue-yi in her heart. Young Master Sue-yi had returned. Young Master Sue-yi, Steward Wu, and the others. But then, Warner's expression became nervous. She knew that Steward Wu was not an easy person to deal with. It was said that he was about to become a true warrior. Moreover, she heard that Steward Wu had a backer. With Sue-yi's current status in the Su family, he would not be able to get away with it. Warner began to worry. Don't worry. Tell me, has this dog slave bullied you all these years? Looking at Warner's originally delicate little hands full of calluses and the valuable things in his courtyard had all disappeared without a trace, Sue-yi thought that it was not difficult to imagine the life Warner had lived in the past 3 years. Young Master Sue-yi, I'm fine. However, some of the things in the courtyard have been taken away by Steward Wu and the others. I'm useless. I couldn't protect young Master Sue-yi's things, said Warner softly, her face full of self-blame. For the past 3 years, has your monthly allowance been docked by this dog of a slave? Sue-yi did not care about the worldly possessions in the courtyard. Thinking back to when he was still in the Su family, he had always treated Warner as his own little sister. He had lived a life of luxury, far from what the other servants and maids could compare to. But looking at Warner now, she was wearing coarse clothes. The Su family had always paid their servants well, and their benefits were among the best in the city. Sue thought that there was definitely someone who had docked Warner's monthly allowance on purpose, and Steward Wu was in charge of this. Monthly allowance, Warner wanted to say something but stopped. Looking into Sue-yi's eyes, she seemed to have an invisible power. Then she gathered her courage and said, Steward Wu said that I have not registered with the Su family, so I don't have a monthly allowance. If I don't listen to him, he will kick me out of the Su family. Sue-yi's eyes began to tremble. He had originally thought that Warner's monthly allowance had been docked quite a bit. Who would have thought that these dog slaves would be so bold? They did not have a single cent of monthly allowance, and they even had designs on Warner. It had been 3 years, and she had not had a single cent of monthly allowance. She had also suffered all kinds of bullying. Sue-yi could not imagine how this delicate little girl in front of him had endured these 3 years. Thinking of this, Sue-yi's heart was filled with incomparable pain. Sue-yi had never treated Warner as his servant. In his heart, Warner had always been his little sister. In these 3 years, Warner had been bullied to such an extent. What a dog slave. Sue-yi stared at Steward Wu. His pitch-black eyes were filled with awe, like 2 bottomless abysses. His entire body emitted a fierce aura. This aura caused Steward Wu to feel a chill all over his body. He could not help but shiver. However, immediately after, Steward Wu gritted his teeth and his gaze darkened. All these years, as Steward Wu, he had a backer behind him. Some members of the Su family had to nod their heads when they saw him. When had he ever been called a dog slave and looked down upon like this? Sue-yi was indeed the young master of the Su family. However, he was no longer the same as he had been in the past. Sue-yi, don't be too arrogant. I'm here today to inform you that the Su family may be taking back this courtyard. You slap. Slap. Before Steward Wu could finish speaking, a crisp slap was heard from his face. A red and swollen palm print covered half of his face. A mouthful of blood and a few teeth were spat out of his mouth. The servants were dumbfounded. They did not even have time to see what had happened clearly. You dare to hit me? Steward Wu was also dumbfounded. His face was blank, as if he could not believe it. Slap. Sue-yi slapped him again. The crisp slap was heard as a substitute for an answer. The other half of Steward Wu's face was immediately swollen red, and he spat out blood. Trash, you actually dare to hit me. Do you think I don't dare to take care of you? Shocked and furious, Steward Wu finally came back to his senses. Steeling his heart, he suddenly shook his arm and threw a punch directly at Su Yi's chest. Steward Wu's punch carried an absolute aura. As the Su family steward, although he was also a servant, he still had the qualifications to cultivate martial arts. Steward Wu was not too old. He had already successfully built his foundation in his early 30s. Once he could step into the soul essence realm in the next few years, his status in the Su family would definitely improve. Looking at Butler Wu's powerful punch, the corners of Su Yi's eyes twitched slightly. He took a small step to the left and sucked in a deep breath. Then he twisted his waist. With a whoosh, Steward Wu's punch carried the sound of air pressure as it brushed past Su Yi's chest. Everything seemed to be within his expectations. Su Yi's expression did not change. With a shake of his wrist, his 5 fingers curled slightly, and he directly grabbed Steward Wu's waist. At that moment, Steward Wu, who was surprised that Su Yi actually dodged his punch, immediately seemed to feel something. An extremely dangerous aura suddenly climbed up from his heart. Crack, crack, the sound of bones breaking rang out. Following that, Steward Wu immediately cried out in pain, as if he had suffered the most intense pain. His entire body twitched, and his body immediately fell to the ground, twitching nonstop. All of this happened as fast as lightning. Su Yi's claw directly broke a few of Steward Wu's ribs. Steward Wu's strength was definitely not weak. He would definitely be able to deal with 1 or 2 tigers and wolves. However, at that moment, he could not even withstand a single blow from Su Yi. His ribs were easily broken. At the same time, Su Yi's figure silently rushed forward. His seemingly gentle and firm face was like an elegant lion suddenly raising its sharp fangs. His fist landed directly on Steward Wu's face. Bang! It was too fast. Steward Wu screamed as half of his face seemed to have been smashed. His bones were deeply dented, and his entire face seemed to have been twisted together. He spat out large mouthfuls of blood, looking miserable and ferocious. Screw your grandmother. One is not someone a dog slave like you can bully. You don't even respect your master. Today, I will teach you how to be a slave. Bang! Bang! Su Yi was furious. His fists and feet rained down on Steward Wu's body like a storm. He casually picked up a brick from the ground and mercilessly smashed it down in anger. Ah! The pitiful Steward Wu screamed again and again. After a few hits, he could no longer scream. He was smashed until he was drenched in blood. His face was deformed, and the bones in his body kept cracking. Dog slave, do you still want her to listen to you? Su Yi was furious. Finally, he viciously smashed the brick between Steward Wu's legs. Instantly, there was a bloody mess. Steward Wu's third leg was directly smashed into meat paste. It was a horrible sight. After Steward Wu's last miserable scream, his eyes darkened in fear and shock. He directly fainted. Only then did Su Yi throw the brick in his hand to the side. He clapped his hands, and his expression was cold. The bodies of the servants could not stop trembling. Their eyes were filled with fear and shock. At this moment, the youth had clearly calmed down, but for no reason, the air seemed to explode. It affected their heartbeats and made their hair stand on end. My 7, Genuine L, first send, drag this dog slave away. Tell the people who should be told that the monthly allowance he owes will be repaid 100-fold. If I don't see a missing piece of paper in my courtyard in 3 days, then everyone involved will end up like this dog slave. Su Yi shouted. This time he was really angry. Even a few servants dared to be so domineering in front of him. It seemed that in these 3 years, the Su family had changed a lot. It was necessary to tell everyone that he was not dead and had returned to the Su family. Chapter 6. Young Master Su Wan'er's eyes were glazed over. She was dumbfounded and frightened. Don't worry, I won't let anyone bully you again. Su Yi turned his head, and the stern expression on his face disappeared. Looking at the delicate girl in front of him, there was only heartache. Young Master Su Yi, I'm fine. You beat up housekeeper Wu? I'm afraid there will be some trouble. You shouldn't have done this for me. Warner was very worried. Apparently, housekeeper Wu had a backer. Su Yi's heart ached. This girl was still thinking about him. He smiled and said, "Don't forget, no matter what, I'm still a young man of the Su clan. Beating up a servant is nothing. You clean up here. I'm going to go see grandfather." "Okay, go and see the old master. With the old master here, no one will dare to do anything to you." Wan'er was relieved. She thought that Su Yi was going to find grandfather to protect himself. With grandfather here, there was nothing to worry about. Su Yi smiled bitterly and did not say anything. He returned to the Su clan. Naturally, the first thing to do was to see the grandfather who loved him the most. From the moment he was born, Su Yi had memories. He was reborn with those memories. Su Yi remembered that right after he was born, his mother had left. But before she left, the tears in her eyes were still imprinted in Su Yi's heart. "Su Yi, forgive father. The greatest love I can give you is to find your mother one day. When you grow up, you will naturally understand." Not long after, his father left behind these words and quietly left. 15 years had passed, and there was no news of him. It was unknown whether he was alive or dead. But from a young age until now, Su Yi had never blamed his father and mother. He had never even asked about his parents. His mother's tears and grief before she left. His father's tenacity and pain when he left. Su Yi was very clear that he had not been abandoned. If his mother and father had not met with something big, they would not have left. Although he was reborn with the memories of his previous life, Su Yi had long integrated himself into the Su family and accepted reality. His previous life had already passed. Since he had the chance to be reborn, he couldn't waste his time like his previous life. In the Su family, Su Yi had the deepest feelings for his grandfather. 3 years ago, it was also his grandfather, Su Yuntian, who stepped in and suppressed the disaster he had caused. Although he didn't say anything, Su Yi had always felt guilty. Su Yi's appearance in the Su family attracted a lot of attention along the way. Ignoring him, Su Yi went straight to the courtyard where his grandfather, Su Yuntian, was resting. "Young Master Su Yi, that's great. You're finally back." When the old servant of the Su family who had been following Su Yuntian saw Su Yi, he was very happy and his eyes were filled with kindness. The old servant's face was full of wrinkles, but the light in his eyes was unusually clear. Su Yi didn't feel anything before, but now he could see that this old servant was not an ordinary person. But immediately, the old servant told Su Yi a piece of news. His grandfather, Su Yuntian, went into seclusion a month ago. "Young Master Su Yi, it's good that you're back. Stay at home first," the old servant said. "Okay." Su Yi nodded and could only leave. "Anyway, it's about time. I'll prepare to build my foundation first." After leaving the courtyard, Su Yi raised his eyes and softly muttered. After preparing for so long, it was time to build his foundation. He had already wasted a lot of time. Since he planned to build his foundation, Su Yi didn't dare to be careless. He had to go to the Hanwu Pavilion first. The Su family had the Hanwen Pavilion and the Hanwu Pavilion. The Hanwen Pavilion was the place where the Su family's children learned how to read and write. Although martial arts were prosperous in this world, and martial arts were respected, culture was also respected. If one didn't have a cultural foundation, even if they obtained a profound cultivation technique or martial skill, they wouldn't be able to comprehend it. Therefore, some large families had strict requirements for their children in this aspect. The Su family was no exception. The Hanwu Pavilion stored everything related to cultivation, including cultivation techniques, pill recipes, and so on. It was also the place Su Yi often went to in the past. The Su family's inner courtyard was a continuous chain of buildings, each with a picturesque disorder. It made the entire inner courtyard look like a natural painting. Su Wu was personally injured by that brat. In a side hall of a courtyard, a gorgeous woman looked at the unconscious steward Wu lying on the ground with a gloomy gaze. It was young Master Su Yi who personally injured him. A young servant still had some lingering fear. He lowered his head, not daring to look directly at the gorgeous woman. Gathering his courage, he said, "Young Master Su, he also told us to tell the people we should tell. The monthly allowance owed to one heir must be repaid 100 times. If I don't arrive in 3 days, even if there's a missing piece of paper in his courtyard, then when the time comes, everyone involved will end up—" "End up what?" the woman said gloomily. "End up like Steward Wu," the young servant said through clenched teeth. Looking at the mangled flesh between Steward Wu's legs, he couldn't help but tremble. Steward Wu could be considered to be completely crippled. If young Master Su wanted to settle accounts with them, then none of them would be able to escape. What big words. Do you really think it's still the same as before? The woman's gaze was cold. "Madam, then what should we do now?" Young Master Su, he said that if we don't send the things over, then when the time comes, the young servant was terrified. He couldn't afford to offend the madam in front of him. This was the substitute family head's sister-in-law, the substitute family head's wife's blood sister, and the 9th elder's daughter. All these years, all the good things in young Master Su Yi's courtyard had fallen into her hands. But he also couldn't afford to offend young Master Su Yi. The scene from not too long ago still left him with lingering fear. Trash. They're both trash. Why should I be afraid of that trash? The old man has already gone into seclusion. He probably knows that he can't protect that scourge. Even if he comes back, so what? He hasn't died in the barbarian demon forest for 3 years. If he doesn't reach Foundation Establishment, then he'll be expelled from Barbarian City forever. This time, no one can protect him. The woman's face was gloomy. She glared at the servant and said, "Take Su Wu away. As for that trash, someone will naturally take care of him. There's no need to worry." "Yes, madam." The young servant trembled with fear as he carried the unconscious Su Wu away. After the servant left, a handsome young man walked out from the inner hall. Beneath his long eyebrows were a pair of narrow eyes. His face was slightly gloomy and cold. "Little Wei, that brat really didn't reach Foundation Establishment? No matter what, Su Wu has already reached Foundation Establishment, yet he was injured so heavily by that brat." When the woman saw the young man, her face immediately revealed a smile, but also a bit of shock. "I'm sure he didn't reach Foundation Establishment, but there's something special about him. To be able to survive in the barbarian demon forest for 3 years, he should have some skill." Su Wei said. "That's true. How could that trash reach Foundation Establishment? When the time comes, he'll definitely be expelled from Barbarian City. This time, even the old man won't be able to protect him." The woman coldly laughed. As long as that scourge was thoroughly expelled from Barbarian City, no one in the Su clan would be able to make her worry. 2 days from now, I'll personally take care of him." Su Wei's eyes flashed. He wanted to personally take care of that brat. In front of the entire Su clan, he wanted to personally step on that brat. Only then could he truly prove that he, Su Wei, was the Su clan's future. He was the Su clan's most important descendant. He didn't need to apply for the vast martial pavilion. This was a privilege given to him by the old man, Su Yuntian. He wasn't like the other Su clan disciples. If they wanted to enter the vast martial pavilion, it would definitely not be an easy task. However, he didn't come to the vast martial pavilion to look for cultivation methods. Instead, he came to look for information about Foundation Establishment. Since he already planned to start Foundation Establishment, he had to be prepared. After staying in the vast martial pavilion for 4 hours, it was already close to dusk. Only then did Su Yi leave the vast martial pavilion. "Young Master Su Yi, did you really come back?" As soon as he left the vast martial pavilion, there was a burly bodyguard who looked to be in his 40s waiting for him. The burly man looked at Su Yi and sized him up. He seemed to be a bit surprised. This did not seem to be the down-and-out appearance of the Su family that was being spread all over the place. With the experience that he had accumulated from years of leading a team outside, he secretly felt that the young man in front of him seemed to have an indescribable feeling. "Uncle Han, did you need something from me?" Su Yi knew Su Bai Han. He had always been the leader of the Su clan's bodyguards. Although he was originally a disciple of the Su clan side branch, his status in the Su clan was not low. He was also someone that the old man, Su Yuntian, praised. When he was young, he had even carried him. Thus, He had always been very polite and respectful to Subion. There's a bit of trouble. Mo Buffon, San, and Song Wuchio brought a lot of people to block the entrance. They said they want to see the young master. Subion spoke very politely. In reality, Mo Buffon, Song Wuchio, and San brought a lot of young masters from Barbarian City to block the entrance of the Su clan. They were shouting that they wanted to kill Su-e. Mo Buffon and the others weren't old, but their statuses were different. The Su clan's elders and relatives all chose to keep quiet at this time. It seemed that no one wanted to interfere with Su-yi's matters. The old man was also in seclusion. Thus, Subion had no choice but to personally come and find Su-yi. If they want to block, then block. I don't have time to deal with those brats right now. I'll have to trouble Uncle Han to pass on a message. After I'm done with these 2 days, I'll go see them. With that said, Su-yi left in a carefree manner. In any case, he had lived for more than 20 years in his previous life. Su-yi was too lazy to lower himself to the same level as those brats. Looking at Su-yi, Subion was a bit stunned. This young master was too shameless. In Subion's eyes, Su-yi had quietly returned to the Su clan. At this time, he didn't want to see Mo Buffon and the others. He even said it so nicely. It was clear that he planned to hide in the Su clan and not leave. 7A Looko. Version. A chapter UX unspecified currency. Why is his personality so different from his father's? Is he really his biological son? Chapter 7. Su-yi, come out if you dare. Kill Su-yi and rid man's city of evil. Su-yi, if you have the ability, don't be a coward. Come out and face your death. Hair. In front of the Su family's gate, there was a boiling cauldron of voices. The clamor soared to the sky, mixed with the roars of savage beasts. The number of onlookers was also increasing. Mo Buffon, San, Song Wuchio, and the rest of the young masters of Barbarian City were currently blocking the entrance of the Su family in anger. They waited at the city gate from morning until afternoon, wanting to stop Su-yi from returning to the city. Who knew that Su-yi had already returned to the Su family? One could imagine how each of them felt. However, even though Song Wuchio, San, and the others were angrily blocking the entrance of the Su clan, they didn't dare to barge in. The Su family is unfortunate. Once this scourge returns, the Su clan will never have a day of peace. Inside the Su family, many Su family members had ugly expressions on their faces when they heard the clamor outside. Some of the elders of the Su family were even pounding their chests and stamping their feet in anger. Su-yi returned to his courtyard and told Warner that he would be away for 2 days. Young master, where did you go? I heard that Mo Buffon and the others are blocking the entrance. Warner was very worried. She wasn't worried that Su-yi would go out for 2 days. She was the only one who knew. Back then, young master often sneaked out for a few days. No one knew where he went. Warner was now worried about Mo Buffon and the others who were blocking the entrance. Don't worry about it. I'm not going through the front door. Su-yi didn't seem to mind. After giving a few more instructions, he left the courtyard. The sky was already dark. Su-yi turned left and right like a ghost. Finally, he skillfully climbed over the wall of the backyard and quietly left the Su family. The night was very quiet. The moonlight was like a hazy silver veil of fog, enveloping the mountaintop. This was the wilderness behind the barbarian city. People rarely came here, but there were many wild beasts living here. The mountain stream was hidden between the trees in the kernel. Under the faint moonlight, Su-yi was like an ape as he climbed up with ease. Above the mountain stream, about 100 feet high, the stream was like a waterfall. Under the cover of moss, there was a small hole that was hard to find if one was not close enough. It was only big enough for one person to enter. Su-yi arrived at the entrance of the cave and carefully observed for a while. The mark he made 3 years ago was still there. It seemed that this place had not been discovered by anyone yet. After entering the cave, they found themselves in a completely different world. It immediately became spacious enough to accommodate dozens of people. Stalactites hung from the walls, emitting a faint radiance. After moving a large rock to block the entrance of the cave, Su Yi's expression turned serious. He took a deep breath and sat cross-legged on the ground. Mysterious and complicated hand seals condensed in his hands. As the hand seal was formed, a faint radiance suddenly fluctuated between Su Yi's eyebrows. It rippled with divine splendor, and then it spread to his entire body, enveloping him in an instant. The dazzling light was hazy, densely covering the cave. When Su Yi's figure became clear again, he was already in a space with a radius of about 30 feet. The spiritual energy in this space was dense and oppressive, but the surroundings were hazy and emitted a faint radiance, as if isolated from space. After arriving in this space, Su Yi took a deep breath. The dense spiritual energy in this space made people feel relaxed and happy. Cultivating here had the effect of half the effort and twice the effect. As for this space, Su Yi was already used to it. He had always been called trash, and it was because of this space that he was harmed. After being reborn with his memories from Earth to this strange world, Su Yi accepted this reality and also accepted that hazy brick-like ball of light in his mind. In his previous life, by chance, Su Yi discovered that there was actually a ball of light in his mind that could be clearly seen by him. Su Yi concentrated and wanted to carefully examine it. Who knew that there would be a sudden explosion, and a dazzling light that was hard to describe would explode in his mind. That scene was shocking, as if the universe had exploded. Su Yi also directly breathed his last because of this, and his soul seemed to have fallen into a pitch-black abyss. When he woke up again, Su Yi discovered that he had been reborn in this strange world. The brick-like ball of light in his mind had also followed him into this world. After being reborn with great difficulty, Su Yi did not dare to take the risk to examine the ball of light in his mind. In this world where martial arts flourished, and the Su family was a big family in Barbarian City, Su Yi had also been in contact with martial arts since he was young and cultivated the Su family's cultivation method. In this world, the levels of martial arts cultivators were divided into the Qi refining stage, foundation establishment stage, essence soul stage, essence profound stage, essence spirit stage, essence true stage, essence void stage, and essence emperor stage. The Qi refining stage and foundation establishment stage could only be considered as the entry stage. Only by successfully building the foundation and stepping into the essence soul stage could one be called a martial arts cultivator. The Qi refining stage was further divided into 4 small stages: refining essence in a Qi, refining essence in a spirit, refining essence into void, and finally refining void into Tao. Having lived 2 lives, Su Yi could be considered to have outstanding talent, and his comprehension ability was not bad. He also cultivated the Su family's strongest cultivation method, the purple origin formula. He cultivated essence in a Qi at the fastest speed in the history of the Su family, and reached the stage of refining essence in a Qi, which made Old Man Su very happy. However, things often did not go according to one's wishes. After cultivating essence, Su Yi stopped at the stage of refining essence into Qi and did not advance any further. Obviously, he could cultivate essence, but Su Yi's body could not store any essence, and he did not know where the essence went. Old Man Su personally investigated and also invited people to investigate, but in the end, it was all to no avail. Many years had passed, and Su Yi did not make any progress, so his reputation spread. In the open, due to the Su family's reputation, no one in Barbarian City dared to say anything about Su Yi. In addition, Su Yi had a bad reputation since he was young, and with the Su family's strong backing, not many people dared to provoke Su Yi, but he was secretly called trash. Su Yi was also very helpless. After living 2 lives and being reborn with great difficulty, could it be that he was going to be as mediocre as his previous life? Su Yi did not give up and continued to cultivate. He did not know if it was because the heavens or the gods were moved, but the mysterious ball of light in his mind, which had been silent all this time, had a reaction. Su Yi was also sucked into this mysterious space and discovered the secret of the ball of light in his mind. He also finally knew why he could not store essence in his body. It turned out that the essence that he cultivated all these years was all stolen by the mysterious ball of light. It seemed that after absorbing a certain amount of essence, the mysterious ball of light opened. The moment he entered the space, a wave of energy immediately surged into Su Yi's mind, turning into a huge amount of information. This information was the cultivation method of the primordial chaos supreme technique, and it was as if it was branded in the depths of Su Yi's mind. The Su family's purple origin art could not be cultivated. Once the essence was cultivated, it would be absorbed by the mysterious ball of light. Now that he had obtained the mysterious primordial chaos supreme technique, Su Yi gritted his teeth and finally tried to cultivate it. As he cultivated the primordial chaos supreme technique, he was surprised to find that the essence cultivated by the primordial chaos supreme technique was not absorbed by the mysterious ball of light at all. After carefully studying it, Su Yi found that the primordial chaos supreme technique was many times more vast than the purple origin art. It far surpassed the purple origin art. However, the primordial chaos supreme technique was not something that ordinary people could cultivate. It was too abnormal. First, one had to use essence to expand the meridians in the body and reforge the internal organs in the body. One also had to absorb all kinds of spiritual herbs into the body to refine the muscles, bones, and skin on the outside, and the meridians, and internal organs on the inside. Although cultivating the primordial chaos supreme technique was very abnormal, Su Yi knew that he had picked up a treasure this time. Perhaps in this life, he would no longer need to be mediocre. He would not be too far away from marrying a beautiful, rich, and beautiful woman and reaching the peak of life. Just as Su Yi felt that his good days were about to arrive, he did not know how he had offended that little girl, Lu Ruashi. Thinking about it, as a reincarnated person, how could Su Yi tolerate being beaten up by a little girl on the street? Therefore, Su Yi bought some muscle-softening powder from the black market and put it in his snacks. With Su Yi's eloquence, it was absolutely easy to trick Lu Ruashi, who was only 12 years old at the time, into eating it. Originally, Su Yi only wanted to teach the little girl a lesson, who knew that the little girl did not even put him in her eyes. It was not like Su Yi could not really do anything to the little girl. For a moment, he did not know why his brain had suddenly spasmed, and he even kissed the little girl. His feet slipped, and he even pressed down on the little girl's body. Just at this time, the people from the Lu family saw this scene. Then, the entire barbarian city was shaken, and the city lord was furious. If it was not for old master Su Yuntian's appearance, based on his old face and the merit of protecting the entire barbarian city, Su Yi would not have been simply exiled to the barbarian demon forest for 3 years. Su Yi did not feel anything about going to the barbarian demon forest. Instead, he was secretly happy and directly accepted it. Cultivating the primordial chaos supreme technique was very complicated, and it was not convenient for the Su family. One must know that before cultivating the primordial chaos supreme technique, one had to use the fire inside a volcano to temper the body for 49 days. This volcano did not belong to the Su family, and the entire barbarian city did not have it. However, later in the barbarian demon forest, although Su Yi found a volcano, using the fire from the earth's core for 49 days to temper the body, despite having the technique to protect his body, he was almost burnt to a crisp. After being reborn into this world, Su Yi had the memories of his previous life. He knew very well that the art of origin was not simple. Treasuring a treasure would arouse the envy of others. Before he had absolute power, it was best to be careful. Therefore, leaving the Su family to go to the barbarian demon forest was just right for him to cultivate the primordial chaos supreme technique. The barbarian demon forest was filled with savage beasts and all kinds of villains hiding. There were dangers everywhere. In the barbarian demon forest, Su Yi discovered another huge secret. The mysterious ball of light in his mind could actually slowly expand the space inside, causing the energy of heaven and earth to become denser and denser. Cultivating in there would also be twice the result with half the effort. Chapter 8. However, after cultivating the art of origin for 3 whole years, he still hadn't reached the foundation establishment stage. He'd spent all his time on refining his body. However, in these 3 years, he learned from practice that the art of origin was absolutely extraordinary. Although the difficulty of cultivating it was a bit abnormal, its combat power was enough to kill cultivators of the same level in seconds. In these 2 days, everything had come to fruition. He planned to start trying to reach the foundation establishment stage. The Su family was not a suitable place for foundation establishment, so he chose to come to this hidden cave. When he was in the Su family, every time he entered this mysterious space, he would secretly come to this cave. Inside the mysterious space, he was still sitting in a lotus position. He could feel that he was ready to break through to the foundational level. However, he didn't dare to have any carelessness. Once he failed, his cultivation would be completely destroyed and he wouldn't be able to cultivate in the future. In the worst case, he would suffer from chi deviation or even directly die. Walala, circulating the art of origin, yuan qi flowed through the meridians in his body, making a trembling sound like flowing water. If there was an outsider here, they would definitely be shocked. How vigorous must one's yuan qi be to make such a trembling sound in the body? However, they didn't know that the yuan qi in Su Yi's body was indeed much more vigorous than that of cultivators of the same level. More importantly, the meridians in his body were many times thicker than those of cultivators of the same level after being tempered and expanded over the years. Therefore, the yuan qi flowed faster and surged, making such a sound. Qi revolved from the middle to the outside, from small to large, until it stopped after 72 cycles, forming a big circle. When it was retracted, it revolved from the outside to the inside, from large to small, also 72 cycles, refining the spirit to return to the void, refining the void to the Tao, and entering the foundation establishment stage. Foundation establishment, from the body to the soul, from the visible to the invisible, from the material to the spiritual, the process of qualitative change could be followed. For martial artists, the foundation establishment stage was the foundation of everything. Although the foundation establishment stage was small, it was a qualitative leap that determined one's future achievements, so one couldn't be careless in the slightest. In large clans, it was definitely the most important thing for the younger generation to reach the foundation establishment stage. Time passed slowly. It was unknown when it started, but waves of energy had started to effuse out from Su Yi's body. They were dazzling and multicolored like flames, and they emitted a dignified aura. The light on Su Yi's body was still growing brighter and brighter, and the trembling sounds in his body were gradually replaced by bursts of rumbling sounds, like the sound of wind and thunder. It was as if something was suppressing and rioting within his body, and a series of howling sounds could be heard. With Su Yi as the center, waves of energy surged. His body became even more dazzling, as if a rain of light was erupting, causing this mysterious small space to become even more brilliant. This kind of momentum was very big. Fortunately, everything was isolated in this mysterious small space, and nothing leaked out. Su Yi's hand seals changed occasionally, and the aura on his body became more and more surging. It was as if the sound of wind and thunder was faintly emitted from his body from time to time, and it was sonorous and awe-inspiring, causing the space to tremble. If there was anyone else present, they would definitely be trembling in fear. How could a foundational level cause such a terrifying commotion? Rip, 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 under the terrifying aura, Su Yi's robe, which he had just changed into, was torn apart, revealing his body, which was riddled with scars. His body was wrapped in light, as if a mysterious power was flowing around it. Boom! Suddenly, the mysterious space trembled, as if it was attracted by some kind of force. Rays of light diffused down, shining brightly, and enveloped Su Yi's body. This light was constantly changing, as if the stars in the sky were moving. It carried with it a kind of divine radiance, and it emitted waves of fluctuations. It was as if a mysterious power had crossed through time and space and descended from the ancient times. Under the cover of this light, a black fog, which was difficult to be seen by the naked eye, gushed out from Su Yi's body. It was like a kind of turbid substance. As the black fog gushed out, his body became more and more translucent, and the scars on his body mysteriously faded away. His entire body was sprinkled with divine radiance, as if it was a kind of tempering in baptism. Everything was still going on. The space became more and more dazzling, and gradually, it emitted bursts of thunder. A mysterious power constantly attacked Su Yi. Su Yi sat cross-legged, motionless. His body was glowing, and the pores all over his body seemed to be opening up, absorbing and spitting out mysterious energy. It merged with his body, turning into energy and emitting divine radiance. At this moment, Su Yi was completely immersed in a strange state, as if he was isolated from the outside world. Only the dazzling light on his body could be seen. All of this was very mysterious. If someone were to see this at this moment, they would certainly be stunned and trembling. How could a foundational level cause such a commotion? One day and one night had passed, and the news of Su Yi's return to the Su family had spread throughout the barbarian city. It immediately became the topic of discussion in the entire barbarian city. Mo Buffon, Hisan, and Song Wuchio led the city's young masters to surround the entrance of the Su family. In the end, they could only leave when they did not see Su Yi. However, Mo Buffon and the others threatened that unless Su Yi never stepped out of the Su family's door, he would be in trouble. In the Su family, no one was willing to come in contact with Su Yi. Therefore, no one knew that Su Yi had quietly left the Su family. They all thought that Su Yi deliberately hid himself and did not come out. For 2 days and 2 nights, in the mysterious space, no more black fog appeared on Su Yi's body. The mysterious power continued to enter Su Yi's body through his pores, as if it was baptizing his body from the inside out. Rumble. At a certain moment, a rumbling sound came from Su Yi's body, as if his internal organs, bones, and muscles were resonating. The sound was like a divine sound. Su Yi's body, at this moment, also emitted a dazzling divine radiance. This process lasted for about half an hour, and finally, everything calmed down. Su Yi's tightly closed eyes trembled slightly, and he directly opened them. Cha! The light in his eyes was dazzling, like a flash of lightning, and then restrained, sharp and deep. Did I succeed just like that? It doesn't seem that difficult. Feeling everything in his body, Su Yi frowned. It was said that foundation establishment was extremely dangerous and difficult, but he felt that it was nothing. He had prepared for so long in vain. Su Yi always felt that he seemed to have built a fake foundation, but after careful inspection, he found that he had indeed succeeded. No, it's not just foundation establishment. Suddenly, Su Yi seemed to have discovered the most inconceivable thing, and his face was full of shock. In his dantian, there was actually a Qi-Si vortex, which was full of Yuan-Qi fluctuations at this moment. Did I directly reach the essence soul stage? Su Yi was stunned. The Qi cultivation stage was the beginning stage of martial arts cultivation, and the foundation establishment stage was to lay a good foundation. However, whether it was the Qi cultivation stage or the foundation establishment stage, they were at best the beginning. Only when one reached the essence soul stage could one be considered a true martial artist. Opening up a Qi-Si in one's dantian was a sign of the essence soul stage. At this moment, his dantian had actually opened up a Qi-Si. After careful inspection, Su Yi was shocked to find that he had only wanted to build a good foundation, but who knew that he would directly step into the essence soul stage. My luck has exploded. After the shock, Su Yi's face was full of smiles. This was a good thing. His luck must have exploded, and such a good thing also fell on his head. It seemed that he was one step closer to marrying a beautiful, rich, and beautiful woman, and walking to the peak of life. Looking at the original, U chapter asterisk section asterisk KP, however, although he had easily succeeded in building his foundation and even directly stepped into the essence soul stage, Su Yi's eyes revealed some doubts. Only Su Yi himself knew what he had experienced when building his foundation. He was clearly only at the foundation establishment stage, but he didn't know what had happened to this mysterious space. A large amount of mysterious energy had actually descended and impacted his body, as if it was baptizing and tempering his body. That mysterious energy was very overbearing. If it weren't for the 3 years of tempering his body, his muscles, and meridians far surpassing those of cultivators of the same level, he was afraid that he wouldn't have been able to withstand such a tyrannical tempering and baptism, and his body would have been directly torn apart. Su Yi secretly guessed that it might have been that mysterious force that had allowed him to reach the essence soul realm at the same time as he had built his foundation. It seems to be a lot stronger. Feeling his body, Su Yi was surprised to find that he didn't know whether it was because of the success of building his foundation or because of the mysterious energy, but from inside to outside, he didn't know how many times stronger he had become. Then Su Yi was surprised to find that all the scars on his body had disappeared. It was as if a layer of old skin had been taken off, and his body had become sparkling and translucent, like a piece of warm jade. Su Yi didn't know how this happened, but it was most likely caused by this mysterious space. At least on the surface, this was a good thing. No matter what, he had succeeded in building his foundation, and had even stepped into the essence soul stage. Su Yi got up and found that the rich energy of heaven and earth in this space had dimmed a lot. However, the space hadn't shrunk and was still 3 feet in size. Su Yi wasn't surprised by this phenomenon. It seemed that after he had built his foundation and stepped into the essence soul stage, he had absorbed a lot of the energy of heaven and earth in this space. After a period of time, the energy in this space would recover. Then, Su Yi, who was about to leave, had an embarrassed look on his face. At this moment, he was naked, and the clothes that had been torn by the impact of the energy had already turned into rags. In desperation, Su Yi could only weave the rags together and make a simple pair of pants, like a savage's outfit, and then put away this space. Outside the cave, the sky had just begun to brighten. The mountain stream was quiet, and the grayish-blue dome gradually faded from the top of his head, bordering the horizon. Finally, a soft mist rose. On top of the brown cliff on the verdant peak, Su Yi stretched his body. The heavens didn't disappoint those who worked hard. He had finally become a true martial artist. These 3 years of self-torture in the barbaric demon forest hadn't been in vain. With a smile on his face, Su Yi flew down the mountain. He only felt that his body was as light as a swallow, and his whole body had an inexhaustible amount of energy. This feeling was much stronger than when he was in the chi refining stage. Although it was early in the morning, the Su family was unusually lively. Chapter 9. The Su clan was a big family with many young people. After receiving the news, all the young people of the right age had been working hard in order to have the opportunity to participate in the Holy Mountains test. If they could enter the Holy Mountain, it would undoubtedly prove that they could become strong. How glorious would that be? Dressed like a savage, Su Yi planned to return to the Su clan by climbing over the wall at the same place. Young master. Su Yi was hiding in fear of being discovered when he heard a familiar voice. Following the voice, Su Yi saw one curled up in the corner of the courtyard. Her rosy oval face was pale, and her bright eyes under her slender eyebrows revealed a hint of a martial god. When she saw Su Yi, one face lit up with joy. She quickly walked to Su Yi's side. "Why are you here?" Seeing one tired body and haggard face, as well as the bruises on her hands and neck, Su Yi's face darkened. He had already guessed that this girl had been squatting in the corner for more than a day. "Young master, I'm fine, Warner shook her head and forced a smile on her face. However, when she saw Su Yi's attire, she was extremely surprised. "Speak, what happened?" Su Yi said in a low voice. His eyes flashed coldly. Looking at Su Yi's eyes, Er's heart trembled. This was the first time she had seen her young master like this. He was like an enraged tiger, wolf, or lion. She had to tell him the reason. It turned out that not long after Sui left, Er was forced out of the Su clan. She could only hide in the corner of the backyard and wait for Sui to return. Who forced you out? Hearing this, Sui's eyes flashed coldly. A delicate little girl had actually squatted in the corner for 2 days and 2 nights. Her stomach was rumbling with hunger, and she was probably frightened. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but feel a heart-wrenching pain. Young master, the morning after you left, Madame Su Jiao's personal maid, Xiao Lan, brought people to find me. She said that I wasn't registered in the Su clan and couldn't be considered a member of the Su clan. My strength wasn't as great as theirs, so Er didn't cry. She still had a smile on her face as she said to Sui, I waited here for young master to say goodbye. Er won't be able to serve young master in the future. I'll take you back. Sui caressed Er's ashen face and tucked a few strands of messy hair behind her ear as he spoke softly. Young master, you can't. Don't do this for me. Er is already very happy that you can come back. I was originally an orphan. If young master didn't bring me back to the Su clan, I don't even know if I would still be alive. Er shook her head. She knew young master's situation. Many people in the Su clan were against young master. She didn't want to cause trouble for young master because of her. You're not an orphan. You're my little sister. From now on, you'll be called Su Wana. I'll take you home now. I promise you that no one will dare to bully you again. From now on, wherever I, Sui, am, is your home. Sui held Er's little hand and gently held it in his palm. Then, he walked towards the Su clan's gate. Young master, being held by Sui, Er's heart trembled. She curled her lips and gently opened them as if she wanted to say something. Call me big brother, don't call me young master. Sui looked at His eyes were fierce. It was like an order, but this fierce look was also filled with heartache. Big brother. Looking into his eyes, it was as if he couldn't be refused. Something touched Er's heart. Her voice trembled as she finally called out. Sui smiled. He tightened his grip on Er's delicate hand. Come, let's go home, he said softly. Big brother, are you going home like this? You should climb over the wall. Raised her eyes and looked at Sui's current appearance. Her bright eyes were filled with shock. 2 days ago, she had seen Sui's body covered in scars. But now it was as smooth as jade. It made people want to touch it. It's okay. I'm going to take my little sister home. Sui's eyes carried a smile as he held Er's hand and walked towards the Su family's gate. Er followed behind him. She looked at his back and silently walked. She didn't know why, but tears began to well up in her eyes. It was like she was dreaming, but at the same time, her eyes were wet. She clenched her fists a little tighter. At this moment, the back of the person was like a tall and straight mountain that she could rely on. Er's face revealed a smile. Her heart was filled with an unfathomable feeling. Sui arrived at the Su family's gate. The guard stared at the strangely dressed Sui and then recognized him. Young Master Sui, Madame Su Jiao, said that this little girl is not a member of the Su family. She can't enter the Su. The guard also saw Er. The guard on the left hesitated for a moment before speaking to Sui. Slap. Before the guard could finish his sentence, a crisp slap was heard across his face. A mouthful of blood was spat out along with a mouthful of teeth. The guard's body was slapped against the Su family's gate. Half of his face was already swollen, and he fainted. It was unknown whether he was dead or alive. Let's go home. Sui didn't pay attention to the guard. He held Er's hand and didn't let go as he walked into the Su family. The other guard was still trembling, and his eyes were wide open and his tongue tied. The Su family was especially lively today. However, there weren't many people in the outer courtyard. There weren't even many servants. However, Sui's attire attracted many surprised gazes. Big brother, today is the day of the Su family's younger generations competition. It seems like they're going to select people to cultivate in the sacred mountain. Er said. She had already heard about this when she was in the Su family. It's such a big day. They should all be there. That's fine. Let's go take a look. Su Yi's eyes flashed with a hint of coldness. The Su family's major activities were generally held in a martial arts arena. Only the arena could accommodate so many people. Today, the Su family would compete for a few spots to participate in the Sacred Mountains assessment. For the Su family, it was definitely one of the most important events. All the younger generation had arrived at the martial arts arena early in the morning. The Su family's various branches, except for those who could not make it back in time, had also arrived at the martial arts arena. Such a grand event was related to the Su family's future. It was also a test for the Su family's younger generation. The acting patriarch and all the elders, and deacons of the Su family had also appeared. Around the martial arts arena, more than 1,000 people had gathered. There were more than 20 seats at the top, where the elders of the Su family were seated. In the middle was a middle-aged man, about 40 years old. He had a medium build, broad shoulders, and bright eyes. He had a kind of imposing aura. Good job. Come on. Subai, this kid is not bad. He's only 16 years old and has already succeeded in building his foundation. He's also comprehended the purple essence tactic well. Suyu isn't bad either. He hasn't fallen behind yet. The surroundings were noisy and lively. On the martial arts arena, 2 teenagers were fighting. They went back and forth with vitality fluctuations, their figures vigorous and swift. Chapter 10. Some old men and middle-aged men who didn't look angry also lowered their heads and whispered to each other from time to time with smiles in their eyes. Sue stood quietly beside the awe-inspiring middle-aged man. His gaze did not have any interest in the duel on the martial arts practice field. He occasionally glanced outside the martial arts practice field, as if he was waiting for something. There was some disappointment and disdain in his eyes. At the end of the seat of honor, a beautiful woman sat upright as she watched the 2 youths exchange pointers on the martial arts field. Occasionally, she would lower her head and talk to an old man who looked to be in his 60s. She seemed to be very happy, and from time to time, the corners of her mouth would curl up into a smile. Su pulled Warner to the martial arts practice field. 2 youths were fighting fiercely on the martial arts practice field. The surroundings were very lively, and there was a hubbub of voices. Sui, why is he here? Look at this. Edition in chapter above, 4-inch, it's really him. What is he doing here? He doesn't seem as battered and exhausted as the rumors say. Some people saw Su and Wan and they were shocked. Then, many people looked at Su curiously. Su returned to his own courtyard and changed into a clean robe. His expression was calm, with a faint aura of indifference. His face was resolute. Wana was a little nervous. She secretly tightened her grip on the hard hand that was holding hers. Your guts are as wild as ever. Sue raised his eyes slightly and looked at the youth who was walking straight towards him. The disappointment in his eyes was replaced by a sneer, but it still flashed with disdain. Swish, swish. Everyone's gaze then fell on Su and Su Wan. Even the 2 youths who were fighting on the training field gradually stopped fighting due to the strange atmosphere around them. They looked curiously at Su. In an instant, the atmosphere in the martial arts practice field, which was originally bustling with noise and excitement, became very strange with the arrival of Su. In the seats, the deacons, elders, and others of the Su family all looked at Su with complicated gazes. The dignified middle-aged man in the middle straightened his body and looked at Su who was walking straight towards him. There was no change in his expression. On the other hand, the beautiful woman at the end of the table looked at Su with a cold gaze. Behind the beautiful woman was a girl who looked to be around 27 or 28 years old. She looked at Wan who was being held by Su then looked at the beautiful woman beside her. She wanted to say something, but stopped herself. As to Su. Su Baihan was naturally present for the Su family's grand occasion. Although he wasn't seated in the seat of honor, he still had the qualifications to stand at the front. Su Yi's words caused Su Baihan to be taken aback. He could clearly sense an inexplicably sharp intent from Su Yi's eyes. On that determined face, There was a maturity that was not proportional to his age. He was steady and did not appear old, but there was a sharpness to it. At this moment, Su Baihan felt a chill run down his spine. Su Baihan was surprised. Over the years, he had seen a lot, but the feeling this young man gave him was one that would only make him tremble when he met extremely dangerous people in the outside world. This feeling was like that of a sleeping beast. Once it erupted, it would be absolutely terrifying. What made Su Baihan even more surprised was that although this young master had been naughty and annoying since he was young, he had always been very respectful to him. He had always called him Uncle Han, even 2 days ago. But now, this young master had directly called him by his name. His gaze was sharp, causing Su Baihan to be puzzled. Young Master Su Yi. Baihan is now the captain of the Su family's guards. Su Baihan bowed and replied to Su Yi. Su Yi looked directly at Su Baihan and said, "Then do your job well. If you don't have the ability, I will find someone else." Hearing this, everyone was secretly stunned. No one expected Su Yi to say such words to Su Baihan. Although Su Baihan was only the captain of the guards, his status in the Su family was definitely not ordinary. He was also the old man's trusted aide. His position in the dark was not below that of the Su family's elders. In the middle of the seats, the middle-aged man looked at the scene in front of him. His gaze was calm, without any ripples. He just quietly watched. Su Baihan was also slightly stunned. He looked at Su Yi pulling one to his side. His eyes secretly flickered for a moment, as if he had understood something. His gaze trembled, and he immediately bowed. "I understand, young Master Su Yi." A piece of trash. Not only did he not stay put, he even dares to show off. At the end of the seats, the beautiful woman stared at Su Yi. Her voice was not loud, but seemed to be intentional. It was loud enough for the elders and elders of the Su family to hear her clearly. Su Yi ignored Su Baihan, as if he hadn't heard the woman's words. He turned his head to look at the nervous one behind him. With a slight smile, he asked, "Tell me, who was it that kicked you out of the Su family?" "Young brother, how about we go back?" "Well, I was very nervous." At this moment, the substitute patriarch, elders, and many elders of the Su family were all present. She knew Su Yi's personality, and she was afraid that Su Yi would be taken advantage of. "No problem, tell me," Su Yi asked. His gaze was firm, not allowing her to refuse. "It's Madame Su Jiao's servant, Xiaolon." Su Yi's gaze made it impossible for to refuse. She reached out her hand and nervously pointed at the servant next to the beautiful woman. The servant was already secretly nervous. Seeing point at her, she immediately became even more nervous. "Wait a moment." Su Yi smiled, let go of Er's hand, and slowly walked to the end of the seats. "Madam." Seeing Su Yi walk over, Xiaolon secretly trembled. Her body couldn't help but secretly lean against Su Jiao's back. She softly called out, very nervous, "What are you afraid of? He wouldn't dare to do anything to you." Su Jiao softly reprimanded. Her gaze was always coldly staring at the approaching Su Yi. She really didn't believe that this brat would dare to do anything. If he really dared to do anything, then she could take advantage of this opportunity to directly cripple this brat. Under the complicated gazes of the entire audience, Su Yi walked to the end of the seats. Su Yi stood at Su Jiao's side, stared straight at Xiaolon, and said, "Who gave you the courage to kick out of the Su family?" Seeing Su Yi arrive in front of her, Xiaolon's body had long since started trembling for no reason. The so-called trash young master before her eyes, at this moment, made her inexplicably beat faster. Her forehead was covered in cold sweat, and she didn't dare to look straight at him. When she heard Su Yi's words, Xiaolon's accelerated heartbeat was like an electric shock. It suddenly stopped beating, as if a huge rock was pressing down on her chest. Even breathing became difficult. She opened her mouth, but it was difficult for her to speak. "Pa." Chapter 11. Pooh. Fresh blood sprayed out as Xiaolon's body staggered back. Then she was directly slapped to the ground. Her face had a red and swollen palm print, and her eyes were lifeless and shocked, as if she hadn't recovered from her shock in a short period of time. The clear sound of the slap resounded out, and everyone present was stunned. If it wasn't for you being a woman, you'd already be a cripple now. Indifferent words came out of Su Yi's mouth, and this slap was precisely his doing. Su Jiao was stunned as well, and her face that was suffused with coldness was astonished. She seemed to have really never imagined that Su Yi would actually dare directly make a move against her servant girl. How was this hitting her servant girl? This was clearly slapping her face, and he simply didn't take her seriously. Su Yi, how audacious of you! You even dare to touch my people. You're courting death. In merely the time of 2 breaths, Su Jiao recovered from her shock, and her face was filled with rage as she slapped the chair and stood up. Her gaze was cold and furious as she glared at Su Yi, revealing a cold light. Slap! When Su Jiao's enraged words had yet to finish, a clear and melodious sound of a slap directly interrupted her furious shout. Fresh blood accompanied by teeth directly sprayed out from Su Jiao's mouth when she just slapped the chair and hadn't stood firm. Her body staggered and was blasted flying, and the chair behind her flew out like a flipped horse before heavily falling onto the ground. The entire scene was deathly silent, and even the sound of the needle dropping could be heard clearly. Everyone's gazes stared at Su Yi as if they'd been struck by lightning. If it was said that the slap that descended on a Xiao Lan's face earlier caused everyone present to be shocked, then it was only shock. In these 3 years, Su Yi's temper hadn't changed in the slightest. But now, this slap had descended onto Su Jiao's face, and everyone present in the Su clan was completely shocked. This was the substitute patriarch's sister-in-law, the 9th elder's daughter, and according to seniority, she was Su Yi's aunt. More importantly, everyone in the Su clan knew clearly that in these 3 years, Su Jiao was like the sun that soared into the sky in the Su clan, and much of the Su clan's real authority had descended onto Su Jiao. But now, Su Yi directly slapped Su Jiao's face. This scene caused the expressions of Su Baihan, the Su family's deacon elder, and the old man to truly change. Even the face of the middle-aged man in the middle was no longer completely calm. Ripples appeared on his face. Impudent. Suddenly, right by Su Jiao's side, an old man with an appearance of over 60 revealed a cold gaze as he slapped out furiously. However, for some unknown reason, the expression in the old man's eyes suddenly changed drastically. His body had just stood up when he directly became limp and collapsed back into the chair. His expression was filled with a kind of horror. The surrounding elders and elders of the Su family were also shocked at the same time. They were all frightened as if they had seen a ghost. 9th elder, if you want to live, then just sit there obediently. Otherwise, I won't be responsible for anything that happens. Su Yi indifferently glanced at the old man in his 60s. He lifted his leg and kicked the chair that Su Jiao had just fallen onto to the side. With 3 steps, he directly arrived in front of Su Jiao, who had yet to crawl up. Su Jiao's eyes were filled with shock. The corner of her mouth dripped with blood as she spat out her bloody teeth in front of her. The burning pain on her face clearly told her that she had indeed been slapped in the face. She had been mercilessly slapped by that kid in front of everyone in the Su family. Su Yi, you're looking for... His eyes were filled with fear and shock as he looked at Su Yi, who was striding towards him. In an instant, his gaze turned into resentment and rage. Su Jiao coldly shouted as her eyes emitted a cold light. This brat is courting death. She absolutely won't let him off. But immediately after, Su Jiao, who was about to crawl up, had a huge change in her expression. She felt her entire body go soft, and the origin energy within her body seemed to have already solidified. Her soul essence realm cultivation was completely unable to exert any strength at this moment. Asterisk bang. Asterisk Su Jiao's voice had yet to fall when her lower abdomen was fiercely kicked. I don't hit women, but you're an exception. Asterisk bang. Asterisk. I've already warned you guys not to provoke me. Asterisk bang. Asterisk. I didn't think that you actually dared to have ideas about one. Do you really think that you have the final say in the Su family? Asterisk bang. Asterisk Su Yi's eyes became colder and colder as his gaze became sharper and sharper. He directly kicked Su Jiao's lower abdomen. Kid, you dare to treat me like this? I won't let you off. Asterisk Puchi. Asterisk Su Yi, you're disgraceful. I'm your aunt. How dare you treat me like this? You're only surnamed Su. My grandfather only gave birth to my father. How could I have an aunt? How dare you take advantage of me? Asterisk bang bang. Asterisk puff. Brother-in-law, save me. The mournful screams from the beginning gradually turned into panic. Su Jiao's mouth continuously spat out blood as she was kicked by Su Yi. Everyone was shocked. Only the mournful screams echoed. Everyone was dumbfounded, as if they couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. Men, quickly capture that scourge, quickly. Ninth Elder's face was filled with rage and panic. He sat paralyzed in his chair and said to the middle-aged man, Jingting, quickly capture that scourge. He used poison. If you have the ability, then come at me. You dare to target one? You really think I'm easy to bully? So he didn't stop. One kick after another landed on Su Jiao's body. Every kick from Su Yi was accompanied by Su Jiao's blood spurting out as she screamed in pain. After more than 10 kicks from Su Yi, Su Jiao's screams became weaker and weaker. Enough! The middle-aged man opened his mouth. His voice echoed in the martial arts arena. He stared at Su Yi, not angry but powerful. When such a voice spread, the surrounding Su family disciples also recovered from their shock. What if I haven't had enough? Su Yi slightly raised his eyes and stared straight at the middle-aged man sitting in the middle. He didn't have the slightest intention of stopping, and once again, he ruthlessly kicked Su Jiao's body. Huff! Huff! Hearing Su Yi's words, the surrounding Su family disciples couldn't help but gasp. That was the patriarch, and Su Yi actually didn't even put the patriarch in his eyes. At this moment, Su Jingting's brows furrowed slightly. His gaze was filled with surprise as he stared at the youth. His ink-black hair slightly moved, and his seemingly thin body was abnormally straight, like a sharp blade. He didn't know why, but when he looked twice, he secretly felt an indescribable pressure. Su Yi, enough. If there's anything you want to say it. Su Jingting spoke in a low voice. His gaze secretly fluctuated. It seemed that in these 3 years, the youth before him had imperceptibly changed. First, I'll give you face by calling you uncle, but if your sister-in-law dares to provoke me or one again, then don't blame me for not giving anyone face. Chapter 12. Su Yi, you are so daring. Do you think the elders of the Su clan don't exist? The 9th elder shouted. His old face turned the color of pig liver. Watching his own daughter being kicked so miserably, the 9th elder was powerless. He didn't know what kind of poison that scourge gave him, but it actually made him unable to summon any strength. He was even more worried that if his cultivation was crippled, what would he do in the future? 9th elder, you should save your strength. If the poison attacks your heart and causes a serious problem, then it will be troublesome. Su Yi turned his head, looked at the 9th elder, and said, You didn't teach your daughter well. Wait until Grandpa comes out of seclusion, then I will tell Grandpa. At that time, you should give Grandpa an explanation. Hearing Su Yi's words, the 9th elder suddenly didn't dare to say anything. He was really afraid of serious problem, but he was incomparably sullen. His gaze unwaveringly stared at Su Yi, his face constantly twitching. At this moment, if a gaze could kill, then the 9th elder's gaze would be enough to kill Su Yi 10 times over. Su Yi, what kind of poison did you use? You are lawless. Audacious Su Yi, you are too presumptuous. Next to the 9th elder, the other elders' gazes at this moment also wished they could directly kill Su Yi. They were even more frightened. Like the 9th elder, their entire bodies were limp and couldn't summon any strength. The few Su clan elders who were a bit further away didn't seem to be affected. They had already stood up to check on the Su clan elders who were limp and paralyzed. Their expressions were slightly serious, and they were also very angry. It's just a small toy. With your cultivation, You will recover in half an hour. Su Yi's gaze swept over the group of Su clan elders and elders. His heart was bleeding. This was definitely a good thing, a necessary item for survival. He only had this much on him, because he knew that at any rate, Su Jiao's strength wasn't weak, and the ninth elder was present as well. Su Yi knew that if he were to truly make a move, it would be difficult for him to deal with Su Jiao, especially the ninth elder. Therefore, Su Yi decided to use the little toy that he had obtained with great difficulty in the barbaric demon forest. This little toy was able to soundlessly disperse with the wind, affecting Su Jiao and ninth elder. Su Yi originally only wanted to deal with Su Jiao and the ninth elder. As for the surrounding people, they'd completely suffered an undeserved calamity. However, if he could help Wanner vent her anger, it was definitely worth it to use this little toy. Hearing Su Yi's words, the elders and elders of the Su family, who were originally nervous and fearful, heaved a sigh of relief. Su Jingting looked at Su Yi and regained his composure. Su Yi, since you're back, we'll be selecting a few people to participate in the Sacred Mountains examination tomorrow. If you're interested, you can go on stage and compete. Sacred Mountain. Su Yi's eyes slightly moved. Lu Ruoshi, that little girl, seemed to have arrived at the Sacred Mountain long ago. After pondering for a moment, Su Yi was somewhat absent-minded, as if pondering something. He then raised his head and looked at Su Jingting. Forget about the competition. I'll have to trouble Uncle to leave a spot for me. I'll participate in the Sacred Mountains examination tomorrow. As his voice fell, Su Yi turned to Wanner, who was still somewhat in a daze. He held her trembling little hand and said, "Let's go back." Wanner finally came back to her senses. She seemed to have been frightened just now. This was the first time she had seen her young master so angry. This time, the graceful lion didn't raise its claws, but its fangs. All of this was for her. Looking at the young man in front of her, Wanner's clear eyes were filled with emotion for no reason. She reached out and tightly grasped his firm hand. She nodded, her eyes full of smiles. At this moment, Wanner felt that she was the happiest person in the world. Seeing Su Yi's attitude at this moment, everyone was somewhat stunned. A spot for the Sacred Mountains examination. How could it be reserved just like that? The number of spots for each Sacred Mountains examination was limited. Only those with the greatest potential had the opportunity to pass the Sacred Mountains examination. This was directly related to the future of the Su family, so they couldn't be careless in the slightest. Otherwise, the acting patriarch and the elders wouldn't have appeared at the martial arts practice field today. Su Yi, don't mess around. If you want a spot, you have to fight for it yourself. No one is an exception. Su Jingting spoke in a low voice as he stared at the departing Su Yi. Su Yi slightly stopped, looked at Su Jingting, and smiled. Uncle, there's no need for me to make a move. In any case, there's no one in the Su family who could be my opponent. Don't worry about leaving the spot for me. Humph, what a joke. What big words. Besides scheming, what other skills do you have? Really shameless. A trash who only knows how to cause trouble dares to say that no one can be his opponent. If it weren't for the old master, who could be his opponent? How can a spot be left for him to waste? This absolutely can't be. Following Su Yi's words, the entire field was in an uproar. If one were to say that Su Yi had just beaten Su Jiao up, the entire place would be in shock. They were happy to watch the show. After all, there were also people who were unhappy with Su Jiao's character. But now that Su Yi wanted a spot, it offended the interests of many people present. At this moment, many of the Su family members present brought their family's disciples to compete for a spot. This spot was originally small. If it was really wasted for Su Yi, it would offend everyone's interests. Around the field, there were many discussions. Many gazes immediately stared at Su Yi with ill intent. Arrogant, impudent, more and more lawless. For the Su family to have such a descendant, it's really a sin. He doesn't know how to make progress. Hedonistic. In the seats, many of the Su family's elders shook their heads, extremely angry. Su Yi quietly stood there, as if he didn't hear the discussions around him. He inwardly smiled bitterly. Looks like Cousin Sue E is very confident in his own strength. Then prove it to everyone. Do you have the strength to obtain a spot? Behind Su Jingting, the always indifferent Su Wei finally opened his mouth and slowly walked out. Chila. When his voice fell, a faint origin energy light swept out from under Su Wei's feet. With a touch of the ground, his body suddenly soared several meters into the air. He took several steps in midair, like a swallow in the clouds, and finally lightly landed in the center of the martial arts practice field. Good. This scene instantly caused many people in the surrounding to clap and cheer. The eyes of some of the Su family's young ladies even lit up, their hearts secretly filled with admiration. The Su family is fortunate. Some of the Su family's elders also secretly nodded their heads in appreciation. Fortunately, the Su family didn't only have Su E as a scourge, but also had a genius like Su Wei. He was the future of the Su family. Listening to the discussions around him and feeling the gazes from all around, Su Wei's face carried a smile. He looked at Su E from afar, but the disdain in his eyes was not concealed. He said, "You have the guts to come today, which has already surprised me. I hope you also have the guts to go on stage. Please, Cousin Su E." Big Brother Su Wei can't stand that brat and wants to make a move. Big Brother Su Wei has already stepped into the Soul Essence stage. I'm afraid Su E won't dare to go on stage. Suddenly, many people's expressions changed. Some of the Su family's elders and elders also immediately paid attention. No one stopped them, as if they wanted to take the opportunity to let Su Wei teach Su E a lesson. Su Jingting also didn't say anything, only quietly watching. I actually forgot. Su E stopped and turned his head to look at Su Wei on the martial arts stage. The corner of his mouth slightly raised into a faint smile. One was currently looking at Su Wei on the martial arts stage. She seemed to be worried that Su E would agree to go on stage. Her small hand tightly held onto Su Yi's hand. She slowly lowered her eyes, and a trace of light flashed through them. She had heard of Su Wei before. He was the strongest person in the Su family's younger generation. In the entire barbarian city, he was ranked at the top. She hoped that Su E would refuse. Feeling the small hand tighten, Su E looked at Wan and faintly smiled, as if to let Wan feel at ease. Letting go of Wan-Er's hand, Su E slowly walked towards the martial arts stage. He looked at Su Wei and said, "I forgot. On the day I came back, you said that you would cripple me today. I promised you that I would give you this opportunity." Seeing Su Yi's actions, the entire martial arts stage was once again surprised. Could it be that Su E really dared to fight with Su Wei? Hearing Su Yi's words, the entire Su family's disciples were even more shocked. The crowd wasn't surprised that Su Wei wanted to cripple Su E. This wasn't strange. They were surprised that Su E clearly knew that Su Wei wanted to cripple him today, yet he still dared to come up. This was what everyone was truly surprised about. In the midst of the commotion, Su E swaggered through the crowd and directly walked onto the martial arts stage. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, he stood in front of Su Wei. He looked at Su Wei and the corner of his mouth curled up. He said, "The opportunity is in front of you. Make your move." Chapter 13. In Su Wei's heart, he really couldn't understand Su E. Why would this scourge agree so easily? But Su Wei didn't care. Today was the day he would become the future of the Su family. After stepping on this scourge in front of everyone, his position in the Su family would be unshakable. When you compare notes, you must do it in an open and honorable manner. You cannot use underhanded methods, or else you will be punished according to the family rules. In his seat, the ninth elder was weak, but he still used all of his strength to speak. He was worried that Su E, that scourge, would poison Su Wei like he did to him. That scourge had many underhanded methods. That's right, you must do it in an open and honorable manner, or else you will be punished according to the family rules. Head Z here. Many of the Su family's elders and elders immediately agreed. No matter how they looked at it, nothing could happen to Su Wei. Su Wei was now the future of the Su family. who knew what kind of underhanded methods Su-yi, that scourge, would use. That brat only knew how to use underhanded methods since he was young. When people saw him, they were angry, and when people saw him, they were afraid. If you rely on underhanded methods or use underhanded methods to win, then it won't be honorable. If you want to use underhanded methods to win, then it won't count. You will be punished according to the family rules. My Su family is open and honorable. How could such a person appear? The surrounding Su family members also discussed in low voices. Some mocked, some ridiculed, and some were even quite angry. Listening to the surrounding words, Su-wei looked at Su-yi in front of him. On his handsome face, there was a light in his eyes. He didn't hide his ridicule as he said, "If you have any underhanded methods, then go ahead and use them. In front of absolute strength, everything is useless. It will only make you look more like a clown." Su-yi smiled faintly, ignoring the mocking words around him. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he said to Su-wei, "I've said it before. You haven't been in the soul essence stage for long. It's not enough." Looking straight at Su-yi, the smile on Su-wei's face gradually disappeared. His face sank, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. "I hope that when I trample you under my feet, you can still be so arrogant. You're so noisy, just like a woman." Su-yi smiled. "You." The cold light in Su-wei's eyes became more and more intense. The aura on his body began to fluctuate uncontrollably. Slowly clenching his fists, Su-wei's killing intent was aroused. This brat actually didn't put him in his eyes even at this time. This was challenging his limits. If he killed him today, what could the old man do to him at that time? Looking at the two people in the field, listening to their tit-for-tat words, the tense atmosphere immediately caused everyone's eyes to be fixed on them. In the middle of the seats, Su Jingting looked at the two youths in the field. His eyes didn't seem to fluctuate at all, but there was a hint of obscurity in them. Take this opportunity to kill this scourge. The ninth elder, who was paralyzed in his chair, had a cold look in his eyes as he thought to himself. Su-wei was his nephew. He hoped that Su-wei could take this opportunity to directly get rid of the scourge. As for Su-jiao, she was already unconscious at this moment and was carried to the side. Wan Er stood in the distance, her small hands tightly pinching the corner of her clothes. Her eyes were filled with nervousness as she looked at the tall and straight youth in the martial arts practice field. At this moment, no one in the field was optimistic about Su-yi's chances. Everyone knew that Su-yi's body was simply unable to store yuan qi. The Su clan had thought of many methods and even invited many famous doctors and experts, but it was all to no avail. Could it be that in these 3 years, this scourge was able to store yuan qi in his body? What's more, even if Su-yi had a miracle in these 3 years and was able to store yuan qi in his body, no one in the Su clan believed that in these 3 years, Su-yi's cultivation could have improved. Su-wei had already stepped into the soul essence realm. Under the complex gazes of the crowd, Su-wei took a deep breath, and the coldness in his eyes was somewhat restrained. Su-wei felt that he had almost lost his composure just now. He was actually angered by this scourge. If he was angered by a scourge that he didn't put in his eyes, then wouldn't it prove that he would be affected by him? This scourge wasn't worthy. I'll let you make the first move. Otherwise, you don't even have the qualifications to make a move in front of me. Su-wei looked at Su-yi. This scourge in front of him didn't pose any threat to him, but today, he would become the last stepping stone of the Su clan. Before long, he would completely become the future of the Su clan and become the rightful successor of the Su clan. Hearing Su-wei's words, no one in the surroundings thought that Su-wei was arrogant. This was a matter of course. With Su-wei's cultivation in the soul essence realm, he was one of the top existences among his peers in Barbarian City. Once Su-wei made a move, not to mention Su-yi wouldn't have the chance to make a move. Even Su-yi wouldn't be a match for him. You should make the first move. Remember to use your full strength. Su-yi looked at Su-wei and said indifferently, "You asked for it. Since that's the case, let's end it." Su-wei didn't want to waste any more words. He wanted to end all of this. Soon, he would become the rightful successor of the Su clan. As his voice fell, Su Wei's robe shook and a faint yuan qi surrounded his body. Waves of qi formed under his feet. He took a step forward and his figure directly pounced towards Su Yi. Without using any movement technique, Su Wei chose the most direct and simple attack. As his figure pounced, he shook his arm and clenched his 5 fingers into a fist. Yuan qi gathered in front of his fist, and he directly punched towards Su Yi's chest. Simple, direct. In front of the fist, a fierce wind caused the air to compress and release a whistling sound. Su Wei didn't hold back much in this punch. If that scourge died because of this, it could be considered as removing a malignant tumor for the Su clan. You're looking for death. I'm afraid you'll be killed immediately. How can this scourge be Big Brother Su Wei's opponent? The momentum of this punch caused the surrounding gazes to jump. That scourge, how could he be Su Wei's opponent? With one punch, he would be crippled from now on. In front of the incoming fist, the fierce wind first lifted Su Yi's hair on both sides, revealing Su Yi's face that wasn't pale. At this moment, Su Yi's eyes under his slender eyebrows suddenly glowed brightly. His seemingly thin figure suddenly straightened, and his entire temperament seemed to have changed drastically. It was as if he had become a completely different person, like a sleeping lion that had suddenly awakened. He shook his arm, and with a raise of his hand, he had already clenched his fist and directly punched out. It was as simple and direct as before, but there was an additional kind of swiftness and sharpness. There was also a different kind of aura. This aura swept out, causing people to tremble for no reason. Chapter 14. Bang! Under the gazes of the crowd, the 2 fists collided, emitting a muffled sound of air waves. It was as if there was a heavy hammer, causing people's hearts to beat faster. Crack, crack. At the same time, there was the sound of something breaking. Puff! In just an instant, Su Wei's face suddenly turned pale. His body flew out, and he spat out a mouthful of fresh blood. He landed heavily a few feet away, his 4 legs facing the sky. The fist that he just punched out was badly mutilated. Ah! A blood-curdling scream came out from Su Wei's mouth like a pig being slaughtered. However, he clenched his teeth and did not make another sound. On Su Wei's pale face, his eyes were filled with shock. It was as if he could not believe it and could not accept this fact. Everyone originally thought that Su Yi would be crippled, even if he did not die from that punch. However, looking at this scene, seeing Su Wei fly out, the entire martial arts practice field was silent. A deathly silence. In the seats, all the Su family members and elders were dumbfounded. The 9th elder's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He muttered in a low voice, "Impossible. This is absolutely impossible." At this moment, only one her stood in the distance. The corner of her clothes that had been twisted until it was wrinkled slowly loosened. The nervousness in her eyes quietly turned into a smile. There was also surprise. She knew that the young master had truly returned this time. On the martial arts practice field, Su Yi's black hair slightly moved. He slowly walked towards Su Wei, who was flying out. Under the gazes of the crowd, he directly stepped on Su Wei's chest. His seemingly thin body was abnormally straight, like a sharp blade stabbing into Su Wei's chest. Su Wei stared at Su Yi. At this moment, he could not move at all. Only Su Wei himself knew how serious his injuries were. The power of that punch had shattered the bones in his hand. That terrifying yuan qi had entered his body, causing his internal organs to be heavily injured. That foot on his chest made Su Wei feel as if he was being crushed by a mountain. The formless aura made him unable to breathe. With this stomp, his pride and aspirations were completely crushed. Looking down at Su Wei, he shook his head and said, "I said that I would give you a chance as you wished. 3 years ago, you could only follow behind me. 3 years later, you can only be trampled under my feet." Then, he looked at the figures in the seats not far away and said, "I will participate in the Holy Mountains examination tomorrow. Also, from today onwards, Wan Er's surname is Su. She is my sister." As his voice faded, Sue turned and left. He walked to her side and took her hand. Under the shocked gazes of everyone, they left. That's impossible. Am I seeing things? How could Big Brother Sue be defeated? It's even more impossible for him to be defeated in one move. After a long while, there were sounds coming from the surroundings of the martial arts practice field. Only then did those stunned and shocked gazes come back to their senses. Whoosh! In the seats, the Sue family's elders and elders directly went to Sue side and checked his injuries. Impossible. That kid must have used some underhanded means. Otherwise, it's impossible for him to win. The ninth elder also came back to his senses. He also wanted to check Sue's injuries. He struggled to get up, and his voice was somewhat hysterical. This was a fact that he absolutely could not accept. There's nothing strange. Sue was truly defeated. After the Sue family's elders and elders carefully checked, they looked at each other in dismay. Then, they looked at Sue Jingting, who was still sitting in the seats, and slightly shook their heads. Their eyes were filled with shock and complexity. From the results of their repeated checks, Sue was truly defeated. Furthermore, he was defeated in one move. It was unlikely that he was tricked. In just 3 short years, that playboy actually defeated the Sue family's #1 person of the same generation, Sue. How could they not be shocked? Could it be that Sue has also reached the essence soul realm? An elder could not help but say, defeating Sue in one move, Sue should at least have the cultivation of the essence soul realm. And Sue was younger than Sue by 2 years. To reach the essence soul realm before the age of 15, how shocking was this? In the entire barbarian city, this had not happened in over 100 years. Could it be that a miracle has happened? Sue is no longer mediocre and has become a genius. Some of the Sue family's elders could not help but be pleasantly surprised. If this really was the essence soul realm before the age of 15, then it was enough for him to be a genius that only appeared once in 100 years. In the seats, Sue Jingting's eyes were no longer hidden as he looked at the direction Sue left. In his eyes, there was a light that rippled. Impossible. Check carefully. It must have been that scourge who used underhanded means. Sue cannot be defeated. That kid used such underhanded means that he absolutely cannot be tolerated. The ninth elder had already struggled to get up. His voice was gloomy. He absolutely could not believe that this was the truth. Ninth elder, Sue is our Sue family's young master. Please pay attention to your identity and words. If this were to spread out, I'm afraid you would become a laughingstock. Besides Sue Jingting, an old man who looked to be in his 70s spoke. He looked at the ninth elder with eyes that flickered with a trace of dignity. Grand Elder, that scourge. The ninth elder's gaze was dazed. He did not expect that the Grand Elder would actually speak up for that scourge. Pay attention to your identity. I have also heard of Sue Jiao's actions in the Sue family these past few years. You did not teach your daughter well, and cannot absolve yourself from the blame. Now, as the Grand Elder, I propose that you withdraw from the Sue family's elder seat. Elders, please vote. The Grand Elder interrupted the ninth elder's words. His gaze was faint and his aura started to become fierce. His voice was not loud, but it resounded throughout the martial arts practice field. Hearing this, the ninth elder was stunned. The surrounding Sue family disciples were also incomparably astonished. This was the Grand Elder speaking. As the Sue family's Grand Elder, his position in the Sue family was pivotal. It could be said that he could be said to be on the same level as the patriarch. And the Sue family had always only had 9 elder seats. Even the patriarch was unable to change the decision made by the elder group. This had always been the Sue family's rule. The ninth elder did not teach his daughter well and cannot absolve himself from the blame. I agree that he should withdraw from the elder seat. The ninth elder has always been cautious and conscientious for the Sue family. Even if he did not contribute, he still worked hard. Withdrawing from the elder seat is a bit too much. On the seats, there were Sue family elders who spoke up. Some supported the Grand Elder, some spoke up for the ninth elder, and some elders remained silent. But in the end, the Grand Elder's proposal was passed, and the ninth elder withdrew from the elder seat. The ninth elder's complexion was deathly pale as he once again sat paralyzed on the seat. He knew that this decision of the elder group was something that even the patriarch was unable to change. He finally sat on the elder seat with great difficulty, but now he was kicked out. The surrounding Su family disciples were shocked. No one expected that such a scene would occur today. Su Yi defeated Su Wei in one move. The Grand Elder's words were clearly a declaration of his position, proving that Su Yi was the Su family's future successor. All along, the Su family disciples knew that Su Yi had always been nurtured as the Su family successor. But because of Tianzi, coupled with Su Yi's actions and bad reputation, many of the Su family elders who originally supported Su Yi ended up supporting Su Wei. This was not because they were against Su Yi, but because they were thinking about the Su family's future. But now, Su Yi defeated Su Wei in one move. Coupled with the Grand Elder's declaration, it was enough to make more than half of the Su family follow. After all, Su Yi was the true successor of the Su family. Su Yi ignored the shock in the martial arts practice field and returned to his own courtyard. Big Brother is so powerful. Su Won'er was still immersed in happiness and excitement. She had always felt that the young master's return this time was somewhat different. Reality proved that the young master's return this time was indeed different. Su Won'er was only happy, not surprised. Because in her heart, young Master Su, you should have been like this. From now on, the Su family is your home. I won't let anyone bully my little sister. Su Yi smiled and looked at the little girl in front of him. He lightly patted Su Won'er's head. Defeating Su Wei in one move, Su Yi was not surprised. This was within his expectations. Su Wei did not know his background and was somewhat careless. Look at unspecified currency C, 3H version of if chapter, section FL. Chapter 15. Back then, his cultivation was limited, but now, cultivating the Origin Supreme technique was no longer a problem. The Origin Supreme technique was not even an ordinary technique, it was all-encompassing. At this moment, Su Yi had no choice but to properly plan for the future. He was already unable to return to his previous life, but in this life, he could no longer be mediocre. Su Yi pondered. Since he was reborn into this different world, even if he did not seek to rule the world, he should at least lead the way. At dusk, the sun set in the west, taking away the last of the afterglow from the mountain peak. The competition between the younger generation in the Su family's martial arts field had already come to an end. Following Su Yi's departure, the next few matches had already caused the previous enthusiasm to decrease. Everyone was still discussing Su Yi, still immersed in deep shock. No one would have thought that after 3 years, Su Yi would return to the Su family in such a manner. Violently beating Su Jiao, defeating Su Wei in one move. This news had already spread throughout the Su family, shocking everyone. This young master is still the same young master from 3 years ago. No one dares to provoke him. Someone inwardly lamented. Not long after, a storm once again spread through the Su family. The Su family's guard captain, Su Baihan, personally acted like a thunderbolt, directly crippling the cultivation of several guards and driving them out of the Su family. Those people are related to Su Jiao and the other branches of the Su family. Lord Han is reorganizing the guards. In the morning, there were guards blocking Won'er. Young Master Su Yi angrily attacked, and even named Lord Han. It seems that Lord Han is angry. Some people whispered, as if the entire Su family was quietly changing something. Su Yi did not pay attention to the storm in the Su family. After accompanying Won'er to tidy up the courtyard for a while, Su Yi returned to his room and sat cross-legged on the bed. Su Yi already knew everything about this world. This different world was completely different from his previous life. Su Yi still did not know how big this world was. He only knew that martial arts flourished in this world, and martial arts were respected. In this world, not only humans could cultivate, but also savage beasts. There were also many strange creatures that could cultivate. Regardless of whether they were savage beasts or strange creatures, once they cultivated to a certain level, they would be collectively referred to as demons. Humans were not the only ones in charge of this world. It was rumored that in many places there was an endless land. That was the heaven of the demon race, and it was controlled by the demon race. It was rumored that those powerful Origin Void Realm and Origin Emperor Realm powerhouses could move mountains and seas with a wave of their hand. They were able to fight with those incomparably powerful demon race powerhouses. As for the Origin Emperor Realm, it was rumored that there were Origin Ancestor Realm and Origin Domain Realm experts. However, it seemed to be just a legend. This world was much more vast than his previous life. In order to not be mediocre in this life, Su-Yi pondered that he must become strong and work hard to improve his cultivation. Su-Yi decided to participate in the Sacred Mountains test tomorrow. If he could enter the Sacred Mountain, it would be of great help to his cultivation. According to Su-Yi's knowledge, Man City belonged to the Tian barbarian continent and was only located in a corner of the continent. The Sacred Mountain was one of the top 10 powers of the One Mountain, 2 churches, 3 sects, and 4 groups. It was a paradise for all cultivators. Su-Yi pondered. If he could enter the Sacred Mountain, his chances of becoming a strong expert would definitely be much higher. In his previous life, it was like the college entrance examination. If he could enter those prestigious institutions, his chances of success in the future would be much higher. Huff! After a brief moment, Su-Yi took a deep breath and sat down cross-legged. He formed a seal with his hands and circulated the Origin Supreme technique. His Origin Chi circulated in his body. He still didn't know how the Sacred Mountain would test him. Su-Yi could only prepare for everything. G***, after circulating the Origin Supreme technique, Su-Yi entered a state of selflessness. There was a faint light fluctuation in his body that enveloped his entire body. There was an inexplicable aura. The energy fluctuations in the surroundings were invisible to the naked eye as it slowly flowed into Su-Yi's body. At that moment, no one could see that in Su-Yi's body, traces of profound qi were flowing through his wide meridians. Finally, they gathered in the vortex in his Dantian Sea of Qi, causing the Origin Qi in his Sea of Qi to become more and more abundant. Rumble. It was unknown when it started, but within Su-Yi's Dantian Sea of Qi, there seemed to be a faint rumbling sound. The sound waves were sonorous, like the roar of a dragon and the cry of a phoenix. There was an extremely frightening aura fluctuating, but no one else saw this. The night was like a large gray net that quietly fell, enveloping the entire barbarian city. In the deep blue sky, there were countless little stars. Because there were people from a sacred mountain that had come, the barbarian city was also bustling with noise and excitement even after nightfall. The news that Su-Yi had defeated Su-Wei also spread throughout the barbarian city as if it had grown wings. This news was like a bomb, causing a storm that was not light. No one could believe it. In the Liu family, Liu Zongyuan, who had just passed 40 years of age, stood in his study. On his face that was definitely extremely handsome when he was young, there was a deep look in his eyes. He seemed to be pondering something as he paced back and forth. Patriarch, that little scourge, Su-Yi, could it be that he has really reached the soul essence stage? If it really is like this, then wouldn't his 3 years of marriage with the young Miss B? In the study, there was an old man around 50 years of age. His gaze was focused, filled with worry. Have you confirmed it? Liu Zongyuan stopped his footsteps, looking at the old man as he asked. His bright eyes in the dim study were like stars twinkling. Su-Wei was indeed heavily injured and defeated in one move. As for the rest, I am not sure, the old man said with certainty. This news naturally could not be wrong. It was obtained from the inner circle of the Su family and was no longer some sort of secret. Heavily injuring Su-Wei in one move. Could it be that little scourge has been intentionally hiding all these years? Liu Zongyuan lifted his eyes, the light in his eyes faintly flickering. He said in a low voice, "If it really is like this, then this little scourge has really made me see him in a different light. Could it be that in these 3 years in the barbarian demon forest, that little brat had some sort of fortuitous encounter? The old man said after some thought. There's also such a possibility. To be able to return alive after 3 years in the barbarian demon forest is already a surprise to me. Lu Zongyuan said, somewhat surprised. Patriarch, if that little scourge really has reached the soul essence stage, then what should we do? Could it be that we really have to acknowledge the young miss marriage? I'm afraid that the young miss will not agree. The old man was worried. Back then, the Lu family and old man, Su, had an agreement. As long as Su successfully entered the foundation establishment stage 3 years later, at that time, he would be engaged to Lu Ruoxi. But the situation now was completely different. The position of a young miss in the Saint Mountain was already not normal. Even if the Lu family did not agree, even if the people of the Saint Mountain knew, they would not agree. Chapter 16. The next morning, the gray silhouette of the mountain peak emerged from the darkness of the night. Oh! In the room, he stopped his breathing. Withdrawing his hand seal, he spat out a mouthful of turbid qi and opened his eyes. His eyes flickered with a dazzling light. It seems to be growing very quickly. Immediately, He felt that his dantian was brimming with yuan qi. He was pleasantly surprised. Even though he was not in that mysterious space and was cultivating at a normal speed, his yuan qi was still growing rapidly. In the short span of one night, he could clearly feel that the yuan qi in his sea of yuan qi was much more abundant than the day before. He knew that all of this was due to the primordial supreme art. If he hadn't guessed wrong, the primordial supreme art he had obtained from the mysterious space was definitely not an ordinary art. Stretching his waist, he jumped off the bed. Today was the day when the experts from the sacred mountain would come to test him. He had to be prepared. Big brother. Wanner's voice came from outside the room. Knowing Su Yi's habit of bathing in the morning, she had prepared a change of clothes. After freshening up, he wore a blue robe with black embroidery. His hair was slightly swaying, and his eyes were resolute. Looking at himself in the mirror, he sized himself up. The more he looked, the more satisfied he was. If this was in his previous life, he would definitely be able to rely on his face to make a living. Big brother, I went to the kitchen to get you some breakfast. Hurry up and eat. Captain Su Baihan is still waiting outside. It's time to participate in the Sacred Mountains test, Wanner said as she entered the room. I'm not eating. Let's go. The Su family's breakfast had always been ordinary. He really missed the dazzling array of food from his previous life. In addition, he didn't know if it was because he had reached the soul essence realm, but after last night's breathing, he felt refreshed. He didn't feel the slightest bit hungry. Big brother, do you really plan on entering the Sacred Mountain? I heard that Lu Ruoxi has already reached the Sacred Mountain. She seems to have some misunderstandings about Big brother. When the time comes. Wanner looked at Yi and hesitated. Wanner had also heard that Lu Ruoxi had entered the Holy Mountain a long time ago. She also knew that Lu Ruoxi's status in the Holy Mountain wasn't ordinary. She was also aware of Lu Ruoxi's temper. She was afraid that Yi would be bullied in the Holy Mountain. Don't tell me you also think that I'm not good enough for that little girl? He rolled his eyes at Wanner. Of course not. In my heart, Big brother is worthy of any woman in this world. Wanner shook her head. She looked at Yi and said, I'm afraid that Lu Ruoxi will make trouble for you. Don't worry, after a few years, I'll bring that little girl back to the Su family. At that time, she'll wash your clothes, cook for you, and serve my little sister every day. The corner of Yi's mouth curved into a smile with a hint of wickedness. Although that little girl was only 3 years old 3 years ago, she was already a beauty. Now, she would be even more slender and elegant. Yi, you are so shameless. Suddenly, Yi secretly scolded himself. That little girl was still a little girl while he was reborn. To think that he would actually think about that little girl, truly shameless. PFFF, hearing Yi's words, Wanner couldn't help but laugh. She rolled her eyes at Yi and said, How could I dare to let Lu Ruoxi wash my clothes and cook for me? I'm afraid even when Big brother marries her, I won't dare to do so. Suwana knew best that he had never suffered a loss outside of the Su family. The only exception was in front of Lu Ruashi. Almost every time he met Lu Ruashi, he would suffer a loss. There were even a few times when he was beaten up. "Little girl, what do you know?" He tapped Su Wanner's forehead, then left the room. Outside the Su family's gate, the Su family's people were already waiting. The Su family savage beasts were neatly lined up, looking extraordinary. Young Master Su Baihan stood outside the gate. After seeing he walked up to him. "Uncle Han." Nodded slightly. He already felt what happened to the guards yesterday. Hearing Su Yi's greeting, Su Baihan's eyes moved, but his expression didn't change. Today was a special day. For the first time, the experts from the Sacred Mountain came to Barbarian City to select disciples. This made Barbarian City very lively a few days ago. Even if they knew their talent wasn't enough, no one was willing to miss such a grand occasion. Barbarian City was located in a remote area. Most people had never left the vicinity of Barbarian City. However, the name of the Sacred Mountain was like thunder to the ears. _U_original first 0 The Sacred Mountain was the holy land of martial artists. It was rumored that any disciple from the Sacred Mountain was famous enough to shake a region. To enter the Sacred Mountain, one had to pass a special talent test. Today's test would be held in the central square of Barbarian City. Early in the morning, the square was already surrounded by a sea of people. The streets were bustling with people, bustling with noise and excitement. Around the square, there were already guards from the He, Su, Mo, Song, and Lu families maintaining order. There were also demonic beast mounts prostrating outside, looking fierce and intimidating. In the center of the square, a tall tower had been built, looking very imposing. In order to welcome the experts from the Sacred Mountain, all the preparations were done to the best of their ability. I heard that only 7 people can enter the Sacred Mountain this time. There aren't many people who can participate in the test. I also heard that because Miss Lu Ruashi is at the Sacred Mountain, Barbarian City was able to get a spot this time. You should know that the Sacred Mountain has never sent disciples to Barbarian City before. We really have to thank Miss Lu Ruashi. Fortunately, Miss Lu Ruashi wasn't harmed by Su 3 years ago. Shu, lower your voice. Su is back. I heard that he defeated Su Wei in one move yesterday. Impossible. Su Wei of the Su family has already reached the Essence Soul Realm. How can that trash Su do that? In a lively crowd, there was a boiling cauldron of voices that converged into a sound wave that soared into the sky. With the arrival of the various families, the crowd was in an uproar. When the influential people of Barbarian City like He San, Song Wuchio, and Mo Buffon appeared, some of the young girls' hearts turned dark. Some of the braver girls even shouted out loud. In this world, martial artists had an extremely high status, let alone He San and Song Wuchio, who were the most famous young masters in Barbarian City. They were almost destined to be in charge of their families in the future. This made the hearts of the young girls ripple. When Su followed the people of the Su family and rode the Su family's demonic beast mount to the square, he was the first to feel the liveliness of the square. There was a sea of people, and the noise reached the sky. After 3 years of experience in the Barbarian Demon Forest, coupled with his rebirth, Su Yi's willpower had long surpassed his peers. Chapter 17. Su Yi couldn't help but raise his eyebrows slightly. If he didn't pass the Sacred Mountains test today, it would be a great loss of face. The Su family is here. Hey, isn't that the disaster? Su Yi, he really came back. With the arrival of the Su family, it caused a huge commotion. More and more people's gazes fell on Su Yi. Some young people looked very angry, while others looked at him with disdain. If it weren't for the Su family's experts, there would definitely be people who couldn't help but rush up. One had to know that what Su Yi did 3 years ago had caused public anger in the entire Barbarian City. Su Yi didn't pay attention to the discussions around him, but it was expected. Following the Su family, Su Yi directly went up to the platform through the special passage at the entrance of the square. This was a seat for the 5 great families. Even among the 5 great families, only the higher-ups and leaders could sit here. There were also some seats around, which were set up for the celebrities and small and medium-sized forces in the barbarian city. This time, the Su family's leader was Su Jingting, and there were several elders and experts of the Su family. It was enough to show the importance of this test, and also the importance of the Sacred Mountain. There were only 6 people from the Su family participating in the test this time. Besides Su Yi, there were 2 young men and a young girl. The last one was Su Wei, who was supported by others. Su Wei was seriously injured, and his face was pale. His fist was wrapped in blood-stained gauze. Several elders and experts of the Su family treated him overnight. It took a lot of effort for him to stand up and participate in the test today. The platform was semicircular, and there weren't many seats. Only a few people from the great families were qualified to sit, and the rest could only stand. When Sui arrived at the platform, the 5 great families had already taken their seats. Some exchanged greetings, some lowered their heads to talk, and it was very lively. The barbarian city was huge, and the area wasn't small. These years, although the 5 great families had a lot of secret conflicts, on the surface, they were quite harmonious. Brother Jingting, Great Elder Su, with the arrival of the Su family, people from the surrounding great families had already raised their heads and greeted them warmly. "You're all early." Su Jingting cupped his fists, and a smile appeared on his dignified face. "You're the one who came late." The people from the great clans were also very courteous. Everyone present knew that although Su Jingting was only the adopted son of Su Yuntian and was only the temporary head of the Su clan, Su Jingting's ability and boldness had long been recognized by the entire barbarian city. Of course, the most important aspect of this recognition was still strength. Su Jingting's strength made the people of the various large clans have a good idea in their hearts. This was definitely a difficult master to deal with. Swish, swish. At this moment, as soon as Su Yi arrived on the balcony, he immediately felt a lot of gazes on him. Lifting his eyes, Su Yi looked over and saw many familiar figures. The most familiar ones were the 3 youths from the song, Mo, and He families. At this moment, the 3 youths with extraordinary temperaments were staring at Su Yi. Within their gazes, there seemed to be flames dancing, as if they couldn't wait to eat Su Yi alive. "Su Yi, you shameless bastard, you actually dare to come back. Su Yi, come and fight to the death. Good Su Yi, today we must avenge Ruashi." The 3 youths with extraordinary temperaments almost couldn't hold it in any longer. Each of them was filled with anger and wanted to rush forward to settle the score with Su Yi. Su Jingting, the great elder, and the other experts of the Su clan saw this scene and felt rather awkward. "Impudent, what a scandal." At this moment, a few rather imposing shouts came from the song, Mo, and He families. Hearing these shouts, the 3 youths could only endure as if they had scruples. However, their gazes were still tightly fixed on Su Yi, as if they were about to spit fire. "We've made a fool of ourselves in front of Brother Jingting." Someone from the Song clan smiled bitterly at Su Jingting. "My dear nephews are still young, so it's not a big deal. Looking at your elegant demeanor, you should be able to pass today's test. When you enter the Sacred Mountain, it won't be long before your name shakes the region and brings glory to our barbarian city." Su Jingting laughed. "Ha, I hope so." The family heads laughed, as if they were quite pleased with these words. "Little brats." Looking at the 3 youths whose eyes were about to spit fire, Su Yi didn't care much. There was no need to lower himself to the same level as these little brats. It was all Lu Ruashi's fault. Su Yi naturally recognized the 3 youths. They were about the same age as him. He San from the He clan, Song Wuchio from the Song clan, and Mo Bufon from the Mo clan. Following their gazes, Su Yi immediately looked around. Su Yi recognized almost all the people sitting on the balcony. The ones who had just reprimanded the 3 youths were the He clan's family head, He Quan, Mo clan's family head, Mo Lai, and Song clan's family head, Song Ming. When Su Yi looked over, he saw He Quan, Mo Lai, and Song Ming's gazes fall on him. After not seeing you for 3 years, my dear nephew has become more spirited. To be able to return safely, my dear nephew, is not simple. My dear nephew, being able to return safely is worthy of celebration. Song Ming, Mo Lai, and He Quan looked at Su Yi with smiles in their eyes. However, He Quan and the other two's gazes were filled with doubt. They had already seen the heavily injured Su Wei. It seemed like the news they had received yesterday was most likely true. However, if Su Wei was really heavily injured by Su Yi, then Su Yi should only be at the Essence Soul realm. Could it be that this kid had suddenly become a genius? Or had he obtained a huge fortuitous encounter in the barbarian demon forest? There were many other gazes on the balcony. At this moment, they were all intentionally or unintentionally looking at Su Yi, sizing him up without much effort. Greetings, uncles and grandpas. Su Yi cupped his fists and bowed. He was very polite and did not care about the gazes around him. My dear nephew, you don't have to be so polite. I hope that you can achieve good results today and bring glory to our man city. Mo Lai smiled faintly. He looked like he was in his 40s and was slightly plump. The corners of his eyes were narrowed. When he finished speaking, he couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. Asking this brat to bring glory to Man City. Wasn't he thinking too much? It would be a miracle if he didn't bring disaster to Man City. Our head 6 hair 4-inch, I will definitely do my best. Su Yi nodded and replied seriously. Everyone sit down. The experts from the Holy Mountain will probably arrive in a while. He Quan spoke. He had a broad head and a big face. Today, he was dressed very formally, adding to his temperament. Everyone exchanged greetings and then sat down. The remaining people could only stand at the back. Su Yi naturally did not have the qualifications to sit. Not far away, Song Wuqiu and Mo Bufan and He San were fiercely staring at Su Yi. Su Yi smiled bitterly and ignored them. The people from the 4 great clans had all arrived. Some people from the Lu clan had also arrived. There were even a few elders who had already taken their seats. Chapter 18. But the head of the Lu family, Lu Zongyuan, was not present. Su Yi guessed that perhaps Lu Zongyuan was accompanying the experts of Sacred Mountain. Quietly waiting, Su Yi did not pay attention to the gazes around him. As time passed, the number of spectators increased. The black mass of people connected together, and all kinds of noises soared to the heavens, shaking the entire square. Su Yi was secretly surprised. Sacred Mountain had only sent experts to select disciples, yet it had attracted such a huge crowd. From this, one could see the importance of Sacred Mountain in the hearts of everyone. But under the influence of such an atmosphere, Su Yi's heart also quietly burned a little. Since he had come to this strange world, he did not seek to become the ruler of the world, but to lead the world by himself. He's here. Protector Wang Chuanda has come. Suddenly, there was a commotion on the balcony. The upper echelons and heads of the various large families suddenly stood up. Su Yi followed the gaze and saw that at the entrance of the balcony, there were many figures slowly walking over. At this moment, there were many people entering the balcony. Su Yi's gaze first saw a familiar figure. He was around 40 years old, and his face had the outline of a young and handsome man. It was the city lord Lu Zongyuan and also the father of the girl Lu Ruashi. And at this moment, the person that was surrounded by the crowd was an old man around 50 years old. He wore a long gown, and on his shoulders were embroidered patterns that seemed to represent some kind of identity or status. There was a smile on his slender face, and there was an indefinite light flickering in his eyes. Behind the old man, there were several large men around 30 years old, as well as several young men and women around 16 or 18 years old. These young men and women were all dressed in bright clothes and had an extraordinary temperament. Standing in the crowd, there was a feeling of a crane standing out from a flock of chickens. Greetings to Protector Wang. Seeing the arrival of the old man, the heads and elders of the various large families all respectfully bowed from afar. They were very polite and respectful. Everyone, please dispense with the formalities. The 50-year-old man walked along the stairs, all the way to the front most central position. There was a faint smile on his face, and under the warm guidance of Lu Zhongyin, Yi-Quan, and the others, there was not much politeness, directly sitting in the central position. On the other hand, the few young men and women accompanying them all had a kind of arrogance in their eyes. They didn't even take a second look at their peers from the various large clans. I wonder what level the experts have reached. Su, he had been secretly sizing up the sacred mountain protector called Wang Chuanda. It was said that anyone who came from the sacred mountain was a powerful expert. To be able to shake a region, this sacred mountain protector must be even stronger. When he walked past him just now, he felt an invisible shiver. Perhaps this was the so-called pressure of aura. Buzz, following the arrival of the experts from the sacred mountain, the sound of a bell rang in the square, and the bustling square fell silent. When the bell rang, the city lord Lu Zhongyuan slowly stood up. His gaze, intentionally or otherwise, seemed to sweep across Su Yi's body. Then he looked at the densely packed crowd below the balcony. City lord, around the square, when Lu Zhongyuan stood up, the densely packed crowd also lifted their heads. Gazes of awe and respect were cast towards him. There were people shouting loudly. From this, one could see the prestige of Lu Zhongyuan within the barbarian city. Everyone, today is the day that the sacred mountain has come to the barbarian city to select disciples. This is the great fortune of the barbarian city. I thank the sacred mountain for looking after us. Lu Zhongyuan opened his mouth. His voice was accompanied by Yuan Qi, enough for everyone to hear clearly. Hearing the words of Lu Zhongyuan, Wang Chuanda revealed a faint smile. In such a remote place like the barbarian city, there was also the chaotic area between them. When the sacred mountain chose disciples, they would never consider such a place. But because Lu Ruoxi was too dazzling in the sacred mountain had specially sent people to select disciples, and he was responsible for the matters of selecting disciples this time. This time, the sacred mountain has come to select disciples. There are a total of 7 people. Because of the examination quota, only the 5 great clans have a quota, but everyone in the barbarian city has the chance. After the examination, the young people of the right age can challenge those who have passed the examination. If they are successful in their challenge, they can also enter the sacred mountain. Lu Zhongyin looked down at the square, his clear voice faintly spreading. He continued, "Now, the examination begins." Boom! On the square, as the voice of the city lord Lu Zhongyuan landed, cheers shook the heavens. The liveliness had reached a peak. Everyone who has a quota to participate in the examination, you can leave now. At the same time, Lu Zhongyin turned his head and said to the young men and young women of the great clans, "Go, do the examination well. Don't be nervous." The elders of the great clans also instructed the younger generation next to them, afraid that their nervousness would affect their performance. But in reality, the most nervous people were the elders of the great clans. One by one, young men and young women walked out from their respective clans. Although they were somewhat nervous, but on the surface they appeared very calm. So, immediately after, the robes of these young men and young women fluttered, Yuan Qi fluctuating around them. They rose from the balcony, directly flying through the air. Figures after figures in the air had different postures. Some were graceful, some were elegant, some were clean and neat. Under the cheers and cheers from all around, they all landed in the center of the square. Even Su Wei also landed in the square rather smoothly. Although Su Wei had been seriously injured yesterday, but he still had a quota for the examination. This was only an examination of one's talent, not a battle. Therefore, even if he was seriously injured, it did not have too much of an effect. So handsome. Third young master, he will definitely be able to enter the sacred mountain. Young master Mo Buffon will definitely be able to enter the sacred mountain. Lu Yani is so beautiful. I don't know who will benefit from her in the future. If I can marry her, I'm willing to give up 10 years of my life. There were many young men and young women in the surroundings that had an infatuated expression. At the age of the first awakening of love, the people that were able to enter the square were the most famous young generation of the barbarian city. Every one of them had many followers. Hearing the cheers from all around, the young men and women that came from the sacred mountain did not care at all. There was even disdain that was not concealed in their gazes. At this time, only Su-yi was still standing on the balcony. Looking at the graceful and elegant figures of the young men and young women, he was also speechless. Although he had reached the Yuan soul stage, Su-yi was embarrassed because he had not practiced any movement techniques. Apart from his cultivation reaching the Yuan soul stage, Su-yi did not seem to know anything else. In the past 3 years, he had spent all of it on training his body. Look at Chapter 9 of the edition / The examination is not a competition of handsomeness. If it's a competition of handsomeness, I can rely on my face. The corners of Su-yi's mouth twitched slightly. Then, under the astonished gazes of the great families on the balcony, he walked to the edge of the balcony. He tentatively looked at the 4 or 5 feet tall balcony and finally jumped down. This, that you're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.